Chapter 1079. This scene was beyond the expectations of some of the prodigies from the Sword Dynasty. No one would have thought that Sword 2, who belonged to the aristocratic families, would attack Jinkuei at this moment. Even Yi Gu-chen was stunned for a moment. Then, he was enlightened. He finally understood what Kenpo's so-called trump card was. He did not expect Sword 2, who was second only to Jinkuei among the aristocratic sword sons, to be a spy from the itinerant cultivator camp. However, at this moment, Jinkuei sneered. What a joke. Do you think I don't know? Huh? Sword 2's heart skipped a beat. Jinkuei already knew that he was a spy. A gust of sword chi that carried an extremely murderous intent attacked him from the side. The person who attacked was Jian Shisan. Pfft. Sword 2 hurriedly dodged to the side, but his waist was still grazed by Jian Shisan's bloodbath sword, and blood splattered everywhere. You already knew. Why? Sword 2's face paled slightly under the mask. He covered his waist with one hand and blocked Jian Shisan's attack with the other. You're just a bunch of trash. In my eyes, there's no difference at all. Jinkuei snorted coldly. Whether it was the aristocratic families or the itinerant cultivator camp, in Jinkuei's eyes, they were all trash. Therefore, the sword chief didn't care about the so-called spies at all. Even if all the sword sons died, Jinkuei would not care. He only cared about the success of his plan. After Jian Shisan blocked Sword 2, Jinkuei grabbed the compass in the saint's corpse without any hindrance. Even Yi Gu-chen could not stop him in time. Oh no! Yi Gu-chen's heart sank slightly. He had a feeling that Jinkuei, who had obtained the compass, would definitely be more difficult to deal with than Huang Qianqiu. This was because Jinkuei was really strange. At the same time, Jinkuei got the compass. Huang Qianqiu also swept away a group of obstacles and broke open a saint's corpse, obtaining a Saint Dao fruit. However, this did not satisfy Huang Qianqiu. All of you have angered me. Other than Duge Wubai, everyone else must die. Huang Qianqiu's tone was cold. It was as if the wrath of an emperor could cause blood to flow for 1,000 miles. As for not letting Yi Gu-chen die, it was naturally not Huang Qianqiu's kindness. Instead, he wanted to obtain Yi Gu-chen's ultimate sword domain and the ancient god's legacy. Right at this moment, an aged voice suddenly sounded. Hee, little doll, you're so young, but your tone is quite arrogant. The old voice reverberated throughout the entire sacred hall, sounding exceptionally eerie. Who is it? Huang Qianqiu raised his brows. The remaining sky prides of the other 4 dynasties also changed their expressions. Could it be that an elder from one of the dynasties had entered? Logically speaking, the elders of the 4 dynasties were all outside blocking the monsters from the 1,000-demon nest. It was impossible for them to enter the sacred hall's treasure. Only Yi Gu-chen's gaze landed on Jinkuei immediately. If there was no surprise, that old voice came from the mouth of the sword chieftain. At this moment, Jinkuei was sitting cross-legged in front of the saint's corpse. He cut his palm, and fresh blood dripped onto the compass. Streaks of blood-red runes appeared on the compass like earthworms. What the hell is going on? Even Yi Gu-chen found it inconceivable. It's you. Soon, Huang Qianqiu and the other sky prides also realized that the voice came from Jinkuei. Hee, I never thought that I would have the chance to see the light of day again, Jinkuei continued to speak in his old voice. Jinkuei, what is going on? Not to mention the others, even the sword sons from the aristocratic families were shocked. Obviously, they did not know what was going on with Jinkuei's strange behavior. I'll kill you first, you pretentious prick. Huang Qianqiu raised his brows and used the heaven-shattering palm to crush Jinkuei. He decided to get rid of Jinkuei first. However, to everyone's surprise, the compass in Jinkuei's hand vibrated, and a protective shield appeared around him, blocking Huang Qianqiu's attack. Huang Qianqiu's eyes narrowed, and he used the Vajra palm again. However, the result was the same. He could not break through the defense of the protective shield. Hee, it's useless, Jinkuei continued to speak in his strange old voice. At this moment, Su Qingyu's surprised voice sounded in Yiguchen's mind. Could this be, Senior Su, do you know what's going on? Yiguchen asked in his mind. I'm not too sure. Do you remember what I told you before? This person's soul seems to be strange and eerie, Su Qingyu said. Yiguchen nodded. When he first met Jinkuei, Su Qingyu had warned him that this person's soul was strange. Yiguchen had also noticed it then. This reminds me of an ancient and evil technique called primordial spirit host, Su Qingyu said. Primordial spirit host? Yiguchen was confused. The so-called primordial spirit host is a technique that only people above the saint level can use to preserve their primordial spirit using a special method. Then, they can separate a strand of their primordial spirit to find a parasite that is compatible with their soul attribute. Then, they can let the parasite return to their original body and use their primordial spirit to possess it. However, this method is too cruel and eerie. Almost no saint would use it. Moreover, there's only a 1 in a billion chance of finding a parasite that is compatible with their soul attribute in the whole world. The chance is too small. Most importantly, I'm very curious about how this person's primordial spirit survived, Su Qingyu said. The ruined sky sacred dynasty had existed for a very long time. Even a saint's primordial spirit couldn't survive for so long. The longevity ancient tree could only provide life essence for the physical body, but it couldn't nourish the primordial spirit. This was also what Su Qingyu was confused about. I see. After hearing Su Qingyu's explanation, Yiguchen was suddenly enlightened. He understood why Jinkuei's soul was strange. His soul had been invaded by a strand of a saint's primordial spirit and merged with it. Jinkuei's body was exactly the same as the saint of the ruined sky holy dynasty that he had seen on the mural. This meant that Jinkuei's soul attribute was very compatible with that ancient saint. Is the remaining part of the saint's primordial spirit in the compass? Yiguchen looked at the compass in Jinkuei's hand. However, it was useless to think too much at this moment. Jinkuei had taken the initiative. If even Huang Qianqiu couldn't break the shield, the others naturally couldn't either. Moreover, the barrier had already enveloped the remaining saint corpses. Princess Luoho, Zhao Xiaodi, and the others looked solemn. They didn't even have the right to get close to the saint corpses, let alone fight for them. There were only 2 people who had obtained the Saint Dao fruit. Yiguchen and Huang Qianqiu each had a Saint Dao fruit. It's time to end this farce. I'll lead the tide and unify the Sword Dynasty. Jinkuei slowly raised the compass in his hand, and a terrifying soul fluctuation was released. Vaguely, a black distortion appeared and disappeared in the void. That's, Su Qingyu said in surprise in Yiguchen's mind. Chapter 1080. To be able to make Su Qingyu, a heavenly tribulation saint, so surprised, it was obvious how surprised he was by the scene before him. Senior Su, what's going on? Yiguchen also felt it. The entire sacred hall was covered by a chilling energy. It's too strange. The saint's primordial spirit seems to have been contaminated and is emitting an ominous aura. Su Qingyu's tone was very solemn. For a saint like him to say such words, it was definitely not a small matter. Jinkuei held the compass in his hand, and runes turned into a rain of light that spread out. Vaguely, the entire sacred palace began to tremble violently. Then, the tremor spread until the entire sacred palace seemed to be rumbling and trembling. It was as if a giant was holding it and shaking it violently. What's going on? Damn it, I haven't gotten any opportunities yet. At that moment, geniuses all around the sacred palace cried out in horror. The geniuses in the sacred palace were even more alarmed and frightened. An array, it's an array. One of the geniuses lowered his head slightly and saw the array runes spreading on the ground. The formation was huge, almost covering the entire sacred dynasty's hidden treasure. The compass was also the hub that activated and controlled the entire array. The Great Sky Ruins Array is about to be activated. Your life and death will be in my hands. At that moment, Jinkue's body had been completely taken over by the strange ancient saint's primordial spirit. His aged voice made all the geniuses present feel a chill in their hearts. The Great Sky Ruins Array. It was obvious that it was an array left behind by the ruined Sky Sacred Dynasty to protect the sacred palace. No one would believe that such an array was not powerful. Let's go. Without any hesitation, the geniuses of the four great empires were in an uproar as they ran for their lives. The Sword Chieftain didn't stop them. In his eyes, these people were nothing more than ants. When the Great Sky Ruins Array was completely activated, the powerful existence suppressed under the pyramid would be released. By then, Jinkue would merge with that ancient, powerful existence. His strength would reach an unprecedented level. It would be a piece of cake for him to lead a dynasty. At that moment, even Huang Qianqiu was frowning. He was one of the four emperors, and he didn't fear anyone in his generation. However, this Jinkue was clearly beyond the scope of his peers. He was an ancient existence of the ruined Sky Sacred Dynasty. In addition, the great array of the Sky Market was about to be activated. Even Huang Qianqiu could not compete with him. Huang Qianqiu was not stupid. He knew that no matter how talented he was only among the younger generation. He could not compete with the primordial spirits of ancient saints. Therefore, Huang Qianqiu also had the intention to retreat. However, before leaving, Huang Qianqiu still had to suppress Yiguchen and bring him away. After all, Yiguchen's techniques made him envious. If he could get it, he might be able to compete with Di Haoyan. Dugu Wubai, I'll give you one last chance. Hand over your sword and body tempering techniques, Huang Qianqiu said coldly. Yiguchen did not even reply. He was also considering whether to retreat. However, Yiguchen felt that only one Saint Dao fruit was too little. Looks like you're asking for trouble. Huang Qianqiu did not say anything else and attacked. It was still the giant palm print and the giant palm print. He ranked first on the sword leaderboard and was also the pride of the Emperor Dragon Sword Pavilion. However, he did not use his sword. It represented Huang Qianqiu's arrogance. In his opinion, no one here was worthy of him using his sword. Even Yiguchen, who was a natural saint, was the same. Huang Qianqiu. Yiguchen's eyes were extremely cold. He did not provoke Huang Qianqiu. However, Huang Qianqiu was blinded by greed and wanted to take his ultimate sword domain. Now, he even wanted the ancient god's inheritance. How could Yiguchen compromise? Baji Reincarnation Sword Technique, Mountain's Peak. Yiguchen's sword slashed out. A gen hexagram as heavy as a mountain appeared in the air. The gen hexagram represented the weight of a mountain. It could suppress all things. The sword broke through the gen hexagram and turned into an extremely heavy sword. The surrounding air seemed to become as heavy as mercury. The powerful sword force collided with Huang Qianqiu's giant palm print. Terrifying shockwaves hit Yiguchen's body again, causing him to cough up blood. The pressure that Huang Qianqiu gave him was the same as the pressure that Di Haoyan gave him. However, compared to when he faced Di Haoyan, Yiguchen was in a much better state. At least he was not completely defenseless. Without hesitation, Yiguchen immediately used the sky-devouring secret technique. The difference between his divine dwelling stage cultivation and Huang Qianqiu's 7th level of the divine dwelling stage was too great. Boom! The true qi in Yiguchen's body erupted like a volcano. His aura skyrocketed by 3 minor levels, reaching the 3rd heavenly layer of the divine dwelling stage. Feeling the powerful energy in his body, Yiguchen's eyes flashed coldly. Do you want to try again? Yiguchen's sword vibrated and swept out. Interesting. I'm getting more and more curious about you. Huang Qianqiu's purple eyes lit up. The more techniques Yiguchen displayed, the more Huang Qianqiu wanted to suppress him. The more Huang Qianqiu wanted to suppress Yiguchen, the more he wanted to plunder his secret techniques. Baji Reincarnation Sword Art, extreme fire. Yiguchen activated his strongest technique again. The pitch-black Nirvana demon flame rose from the sword. Yiguchen had already mastered the fourth form of the Baji reincarnation sword art. The extreme thunder, extreme fire, extreme mountain, and extreme wind. The extreme fire was even more powerful with the Nirvana demon flame's power. Heaven and earth unique fire, and it's an upper-grade emperor sword art. Dugu Wubai, you're a natural saint. You've really surprised me. Even Huang Qianqiu, who had seen much of the world, was shocked when he saw Yiguchen's technique. He estimated that Yiguchen's techniques and trump cards were more than the heirs of the overlord forces. However, it was still not enough to shake Huang Qianqiu. World-shaking Emperor Fist. Huang Qianqiu clenched his fist and punched out. He had finally used another ultimate technique besides the two great hand seals. As he punched out, endless purple-gold divine light shone. It was as if it could shake the void. Without a doubt, the power of the punch was enough to shatter 1,000 zhang tall mountain. Rumble. Huang Qianqiu's world-shaking Emperor Fist collided with Yiguchen's Baji reincarnation sword art. Boundless energy waves burst forth. Some of the surrounding sky prides were blown away. Jiankui watched from the sidelines. He was fully focused on activating the Sky Ruin's great array and couldn't make a move. Cough, amidst the violent collision, the sound of blood coughing could be heard. Yiguchen retreated again. Although he had condensed the immovable king armor of the ancient god on his body, his chest had been shattered by the punch, and cracks had appeared. Huang Qianqiu's strength was definitely not inferior to Di Haotian's at the Tianhuang Plains. I'll destroy you with one move. Huang Qianqiu raised his hand. Boundless true qi turned into sword qi and swept in all directions. At the same time, a golden sword-shaped insignia vaguely appeared on the back of his hand. Boundless saintly sword. Huang Qianqiu was like an emperor in a rage. Chapter 1081. Huang Qianqiu was serious. The power of this move was incomparably strong, causing one's heart to tremble. However, Yiguchen was not just shocked by the power of this move. This wave. It's the sword sect's ultimate skill. Yiguchen's expression changed slightly. The move that Huang Qianqiu was using, the Boundless Divination Sword, was definitely the sword sect's ultimate skill. At the same time, the elite insignia appeared on the back of Huang Qianqiu's hand. Unsurprisingly, Huang Qianqiu was also a 9th-generation sword sect echelon cultivator. And he was an elite. Jian Jinghong also sensed it. He was also a 9th-generation sword sect echelon cultivator. Yiguchen knew the power of the sword sect's ultimate skill best. Because he had two sword sect's ultimate skills. With Huang Qianqiu's strength at the 7th level of the Divine Dwelling Realm, coupled with the sword sect's ultimate skill, the power was unimaginable. Yiguchen did not dare to underestimate it. After using the sky-devouring secret art, the power of the 3rd level of the Divine Dwelling Realm gushed out. He slashed out with his sword, and it carried with it a terrifying sword intent that seemed capable of annihilating all life and causing all things to fall. It was the second move of the 10,000 God Tribulation, Life Fall. Kaboom! When the two ultimate skills collided, it was as if there were billions of thunderbolts exploding in the void. The shockwave was extremely shocking, and a vast wave of air rippled out in all directions. Spurt! Yiguchen spat out another mouthful of blood. His chest shook violently, and his internal organs trembled slightly. If it was an ordinary person, their body would have exploded under Huang Qianqiu's move. However, Yiguchen took it head-on. This sword move, Huang Qianqiu was really surprised this time. He had thought that the superior emperor-level sword art was Yiguchen's strongest sword move. But now, the power of the 10,000 God Tribulation shocked Huang Qianqiu. The reason was simple. Huang Qianqiu had been pushed back. To put it bluntly, there were very few people among the younger generation in the Nantian region who could push Huang Qianqiu back. Unless it was the one emperor and 4 sovereigns. Even some of the 10 great young masters couldn't force Huang Qianqiu to take a step back. Dugu Wubai, you have one more reason for me to capture you alive. Huang Qianqiu smiled faintly. He made another move. He formed a seal with his hand and struck it directly into the void. Suddenly, an endless amount of sword light shot into the sky, forming a bronze giant statue in the void, holding a bronze giant sword in its hand. 3 Kings Sword Seal, Bronze Sword Seal. Huang Qianqiu's palm pressed down. At the same time, the bronze colossus waved its giant sword and slashed down at Yi Guqin. A single slash of the sword seemed capable of splitting mountains and severing rivers for thousands of miles. 10,000 Deities Tribulation, Demonic Buddha Tears. Yi Guqin also unleashed his strongest move, the third move of the 10,000 Deities Tribulation. 2 phantoms of Buddha and demon appeared. Tears dripped down and merged with the 9-dragon thunder prison sword. That sword was so powerful that it made Buddha and demon cry. It pierced through the void and clashed with Huang Qianqiu's powerful move. Rumble. Thunder rumbled on the ground, and a violent explosion spread out. Some of the sky prides in the surroundings quickly retreated. Many sky prides had already fled, but there were also many elite sky prides who stayed at the edge to observe, looking for an opportunity to strike. At that moment, they saw that Yi Guqin was able to withstand Huang Qianqiu's move, and they were all shocked beyond words. Pfft! In the violent collision, Yi Guqin's body slammed onto the ground, and his body shook violently. The 10,000 Deities Tribulation was a supreme move. If they were at the same cultivation level, Yi Guqin was absolutely confident that he could use this move to severely injure Huang Qianqiu. Unfortunately, the difference in cultivation level between the two of them was too great. Even the heaven-devouring secret skill couldn't make up for it completely. On the other side, Huang Qianqiu looked a little dazed. He slowly raised his hand, and streams of purple blood dripped from his fingers. Every drop of purple blood had a fragrance and contained a divine glow, just like the blood of a god. He had a head of purple hair, a pair of purple eyes, and a body of purple blood. This was the legendary Huang Qianqiu, one of the 4 sovereigns. His bloodline was special, and it was the legendary Desolate Sky Body. The blood of the Desolate Sky Body was purple and looked extraordinary. You made me bleed. Huang Qianqiu was in disbelief and had yet to recover from his shock. Among the younger generation in the South Horizon region, how many people could make him bleed? Huang Qianqiu is bleeding. To be able to injure Huang Qianqiu, this Dugu Wubai is indeed worthy of being called a natural saint. Seeing this, the sky prides of the 4 great dynasties narrowed their eyes, and their evaluation of Yi Guqin rose by another level. However, those from the Sword Dynasty rogue cultivators' camp, such as Saber 9, Jian Jinghong, and the others, were still worried. It was obviously not a good thing to anger Huang Qianqiu. Dugu Wubai, good, very good. Huang Qianqiu smiled. However, that smile was a little cold. Silver Sword Seal. Golden Sword Seal. Huang Qianqiu formed a sword seal with both hands. A huge silver statue and a huge golden statue appeared in the sky at the same time. The 2 statues held huge swords in their hands, and they swept towards Yi Guqin in a cross. Previously, the huge bronze statue had already injured Yi Guqin. Now that the 2 even stronger statues attacked at the same time, the power was unimaginable. Yi Guqin did not hold back either, and he immediately used the 18 levels of the Azura Blood Sea and Heaven's Punishment Thunder Prison. Then, the 2 extremely powerful sword realms overlapped in the sky. Instantly, a crushing force burst out like a millstone. The sky rumbled, and heaven and earth shook, creating endless waves. The 2 of them were in a stalemate in the sky. The ultimate sword realm was powerful. However, it was still an incomplete fusion of the 2 sword realms, and its power was far from the maximum. Coupled with the difference in cultivation level, the ultimate sword realm was unable to crush the 2 statues immediately. At that moment, Huang Qianqiu stepped into the sky and used the 9 steps of the Divine King Stomp. The 9 steps of the Divine King's Stomp was not only a Divine King's Stomp, but it was also an extremely powerful move. Previously, Huang Qianqiu had used this move to crush Mo Guangdao's body. At that moment, Huang Qianqiu stepped into the sky. Every step he took was like the beating of a war drum, causing ripples to appear in the sky. In an instant, Huang Qianqiu had taken 6 steps, and the powerful shockwaves forced Ye Guqin to retreat. Moreover, he had a strong physical body. If it were any other sky prides, their internal organs would have been shattered by the shockwaves. Finally, Huang Qianqiu took his 9th step, and his foot crushed down on Ye Guqin. Ye Guqin raised his eyebrows, and the 9-dragon thunder prison blocked the move. However, at that moment, a cold light flashed across Huang Qianqiu's eyes. He flipped his wrist. A domineering huge sword appeared in his hand. The huge sword only had one side, and it was like a machete. The huge sword was filled with a powerful force of desolation and destruction. The shockwaves were definitely not something that could be emitted by a quasi-heavenly tribulation weapon. Dugu Wubai, it's your honor to make me use the desolate god slash. Huang Qianqiu's tone was cold, like the god of death passing judgment. With the desolate god slash in his hand, he slashed at Ye Guqin. Chapter 1082. Tribulation weapons were weapons that had been baptized by lightning tribulations. Their power was vastly different from ordinary weapons. Even if they were quasi-tribulation weapons, their power was far from a true tribulation weapon. Huang Qianqiu was the pride of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion and one of the 4 sovereigns. It was reasonable for him to have a tribulation weapon. At that moment, Huang Qianqiu used the desolate god slash and a destructive force was emitted. The surrounding sky prides of the 4 dynasties narrowed their eyes when they saw that Huang Qianqiu had already displayed his overwhelming power. With the addition of the desolate god slash, to what extent would his combat power increase? Desolate god 7 slashes, sky-breaking slash. Huang Qianqiu's voice was cold as he waved the desolate god slash in his hand. The sword slashed down as if it was going to split the heavens. Ye Guqin had just blocked Huang Qianqiu's 9-step Divine King's Stomp and could not dodge it in time. He could only forcefully channel the true qi in his spiritual abode into the 9-dragon lightning prison. He used the 9-dragon lightning prison to block Huang Qianqiu's fatal attack once again. Clang! The desolate god slash and the 9-dragon lightning prison collided, and a piercing sound of metal clashing rang out. It was like the clanging of weapons in the heaven world. Endless waves of sword qi swept out in all directions. The terrifying shockwaves from the collision made the top sky prides of the 4 dynasties twitch their eyes. Ye Guqin's body flew out like a cannonball from the collision and crashed heavily onto the ground. His aura instantly plummeted. Is Dugu Wubai dead? Seeing Ye Guqin fall to the ground, some of the sky prides present could not help but pay attention. Mu Xingzu, Ling Moyin, and the rest were as pale as paper and their hearts were trembling. Kenpo, Jian Jinghong, and the rest were also frowning. They were being held back by the sword sons and sky prides of the aristocratic families and could not help Ye Guqin. On the other side, Huang Qianqiu stood in the air with the desolate god slash in his hand. He looked like a god of war, handsome and dignified. In his opinion, Ye Guqin's ability was enough to force him to use the desolate god slash. On top of that, the gap between their realms was so huge. Therefore, even though he had defeated Ye Guqin, Huang Qianqiu was not happy at all. Wasn't this supposed to be the result? Cough, the sound of coughing blood came from the ruins. Dugu Wubai is still alive? Some of the sky prides were surprised. Princess Luoho, Yin Ju, Shangguan Jingshen, and the others were all very surprised. As the dust settled, Ye Guqin slowly stood up. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Not only was Huang Qianqiu's slaughter of the desolate god extremely powerful, but it also contained an aura of desolation and destruction, causing Ye Guqin to be severely injured. If not for the fact that Ye Guqin possessed the heart of the ancient god and had a strong vitality, he would have died. Most likely, at this moment, he was already at the end of his rope. However, this was not the most important thing. More importantly, the spiritual abode in Yiguchen's dantian had shattered. Why do I feel that Dugu Wubai's aura has dropped by a lot? Yeah, he doesn't even have the aura of the divine dwelling stage. Evidently, the other sky prides had also noticed Yiguchen's abnormality. At this moment, Huang Qianqiu, who was hovering in the air, said indifferently, Dugu Wubai, how does it feel to have your spiritual abode shattered? What? Hearing Huang Qianqiu's words, the pupils of the sky prides from the four empires shrank at the same time. Dugu Wubai's spiritual abode had been shattered? Master. Mu Xingzu's body trembled slightly. The expressions of Jian Jinghong and the others also instantly tightened. However, with Yiguchen's current state, they had no choice but to believe Huang Qianqiu's words. This was because no one could sense the aura of the divine dwelling stage from Yiguchen's body. How could this be? Zhao Xiaodi was also somewhat dazed. Yiguchen had broken through to the divine dwelling stage not too long ago, and she had even witnessed it. How long had it been since then, and Huang Qianqiu had destroyed his spiritual abode? It could only be said that the world was unpredictable. On the other side, the valiant little Marquis Zhong Shan wanted to laugh out loud. He was undoubtedly the one who rejoiced the most about Yiguchen's spiritual abode being destroyed. Just like him, there were also Yin Zhu, Shengguan Jingshen, and the other sky prides from the aristocratic families. It could be said that Yiguchen had risen from the Sword Dynasty and could be called a legend. He had suppressed the sky prides from the aristocratic families to the point of suffocation. Now, the mountain that had been pressing down on them had finally been completely shattered. Feeling the various gazes from the surrounding sky prides, Yiguchen himself was the calmest one. Huang Qianqiu was right. The spiritual abode in his dantian had indeed been shattered. Although Yiguchen had used the 9-dragon thunder prison to block the rage god slash, the destructive power had still penetrated his defense and shattered Yiguchen's spiritual abode. If it were any other sky prides, they would have gone crazy. However, Yiguchen's expression was incomparably calm. The reason was simple. With the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, Yiguchen was not afraid of his spiritual abode being destroyed. Or in other words, even if Huang Qianqiu did not destroy his spiritual abode, in the future, Yiguchen would take the initiative to destroy his spiritual abode. This was because Yiguchen was ambitious. He wanted to cultivate the highest quality spiritual abode. And the only way to cultivate it was to destroy one's spiritual abode over and over again and then rebuild it. Just like Feng Manlu and Ling Mo Shu. It was because of this that Yiguchen did not panic at all. In fact, Huang Qianqiu had even helped Yiguchen destroy his spiritual abode for free. Dugu Wubai, I have to say that I do admire you a little. Your spiritual abode has been destroyed, but you are still so calm. Huang Qianqiu said calmly as he looked at Yiguchen's calm expression. Yiguchen's performance was beyond his expectations. Huang Qianqiu, I will remember this. One day, I will give you a taste of your own medicine. Yiguchen said coldly. Yiguchen did not provoke others for no reason, but he would not allow others to bully him either. Huang Qianqiu had forced him and even destroyed his spiritual abode just for the cultivation technique in his body. Although Yiguchen had the ability to rebuild his spiritual abode, this enmity had been formed. Ha, you are already a cripple. Do you have the right to say such things? Huang Qianqiu did not take it to heart. He just found it laughable. Not to mention Yiguchen, whose spiritual abode had been destroyed. Even if Yiguchen was at his peak, Huang Qianqiu would not care about him at all. Yiguchen said that he would give Huang Qianqiu a taste of his own medicine because he wanted to destroy Huang Qianqiu's spiritual abode. But, how was that possible? The other sky prides shook their heads. They thought that Yiguchen had said it in a fit of anger. Alright, I will suppress you now. Huang Qianqiu did not want to drag things out. After his spiritual abode was destroyed, Yiguchen would be even more powerless to resist. Yiguchen's face was also slightly solemn. Now that his spiritual abode had been destroyed, his combat strength had indeed dropped. It would be difficult for him to face Huang Qianqiu's attack. However, just as Huang Qianqiu was about to suppress Huang Qianqiu, the entire sacred hall suddenly shook violently. On the ground, a series of complex and mysterious runes appeared, bringing with them an ancient and powerful aura. Jiankui, who was sitting cross-legged at the top of the pyramid, let out an old laugh. The Great Sky Ruins Array has finally been activated. My plan is about to come to fruition. Chapter 1083. Jiankui had been possessed by an ancient primordial spirit. The ancient primordial spirit was obviously a saint of the Void Sky dynasty. Naturally, it was familiar with the formations in the sacred dynasty's treasure. When Yi Guqian approached the sacred hall, he also sensed that there was a faint fluctuation of a powerful array below the sacred hall. The formation was the Great Formation of Sky Market that Jiankui had mentioned. The Great Formation of Sky Market had become the protective formation of the sacred dynasty's treasure, which showed how powerful it was. With the help of the compass in his hand, Jiankui had finally activated the Great Formation of Sky Market. His plan with the Sword Dynasty's pseudo-saint family could finally be activated. The plan has been activated. Those who have nothing to do with it should leave, Jiankui said in an old voice under the mask. It wasn't that he didn't want to deal with Huang Qianqiu and the others. It was just that Huang Qianqiu had the backing of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion. The Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion was also an overlord force with true Saint Realm experts. If Huang Qianqiu died here, the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion wouldn't let it go. As soon as Jiankui finished speaking, he lifted the compass in his hand. Below the ground, runes rose into the air, and a mysterious force spread out. Suddenly, except for Yi Guqian, everyone else was teleported to the outside of the sacred dynasty's treasure. At the same time, in the Thousand Demon Nest mountain range, the war continued. The pseudo-saints of the four great dynasties were fighting with the monster kings of the Thousand Demon Nest. The rest of the honorables were also fighting against the 7th-rank demonic beasts. Suddenly, the entire Thousand Demon Nest mountain range shook violently. It was as if an ancient giant had stomped on the ground, creating a deafening roar. What's going on? What's going on? Did something happen in the sacred dynasty's treasure? The experts of the four great dynasties were all alarmed. They knew very well that the change had something to do with the sacred dynasty's treasure. Yi Tianqing, who was in the midst of a great battle with the king of monsters, narrowed her eyes slightly. It seems that something happened in the sacred dynasty's treasure. I wonder if they got the fruit of the saint path. Yi Tianqing murmured. The fruit of the saint path was very important to the Sword Dynasty. If the Sword Dynasty could produce a heavenly tribulation saint, the entire dynasty's chaos would be stabilized. Just as Yi Tianqing was pondering, formation runes appeared all over the Thousand Demons Nest mountain range. Vaguely, the sacred dynasty's treasure hidden deep underground was rumbling. The sacred dynasty's treasure seemed to break out of the ground. Is that the sacred dynasty's treasure? The experts from the four great empires revealed astonishment when they saw the large piece of land that had broken out from the ground. It was their first time seeing the sacred dynasty S's. And now, there was obviously some kind of change in the sacred dynasty's treasure. Countless runes spread. It spread chi like a star. The array formation's demon, S saint was God, S heaven. When Hua Yuntao and the other false saints from the aristocratic families saw this scene, their eyes suddenly revealed a trace of joy. He did it. He really did it. Next. Hua Yuntao's old eyes flashed with coldness. The next moment, Yi Tianqing was suddenly wrapped by the array formation's power and disappeared. At the same time, the three false saints, Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and Gu Yuanxi, disappeared. Hua Yuntao and the others from the aristocratic family's camp also disappeared. They were all teleported to the sacred palace of the sacred dynasty's treasure by the array formation's power. The disappearance of the 10 false saints from the Sword Dynasty caused quite a stir. What's going on with the Sword Dynasty? The War God Dynasty's false saint expert, Marquis Valiant, raised his eyebrows. Fortunately, the sacred dynasty's treasure had appeared and interrupted the battle. The monster kings and the human false saint experts were temporarily divided into two sides and confronted each other. The moment Yi Tianqing and the other true saints from the Sword Dynasty were teleported to the sacred palace, the entire Great Array formation of Sky Market began to operate. A barrier suddenly appeared and covered the entire area of the sacred dynasty's treasure. The people from the outside world could not see through the barrier. Of course, they could not break the barrier either. Even if a false saint expert or a demonic beast king were to attack, they would not be able to break this layer of barrier. The true saints of the four great dynasties who were teleported out of the sacred palace still had lingering fear on their faces. Huang Qianqiu's face was extremely gloomy. He had been traveling in the South Horizon region for a long time and had never suffered a loss. Now, he had suffered a great loss. At least, he did not manage to capture Yiguchen. Moreover, Huang Qianqiu also knew that Jin Kuei would never let Yiguchen go. In other words, he had no chance at all. As for the others, such as Zhong Shan, Yin Zhu, and Shengguan Jingshen, they were gloating, thinking that Yiguchen was destined to die. How could this be? Master! Mu Xingzu's eyes were red as she frantically attacked the barrier. However, she could not move it at all. It's useless. Even a false saint expert would not be able to break this barrier, Jian Jinghong said in a low voice. Ling Moyin was also absent-minded for a while. As for Suki Miyazaki, Zhao Xiaodi, and the other girls, although they did not have a particularly deep relationship with Yiguchen, they were also sighing at this moment. In the sacred palace, Yiguchen looked coldly at Jin Kuei, who was on top of the pyramid. Kid, do you know why I did not let you go? Jin Kuei asked. Why? Yiguchen asked calmly. Yiguchen was even calmer now that the situation had come to this. His spiritual dwelling had been destroyed, and his combat strength had hit rock bottom. Facing Jin Kuei, who had been possessed by an ancient primordial spirit, he had almost no power to resist. However, the more this was the case, the calmer Yiguchen became. Ha, I can sense that there is also a saint primordial spirit residing in your body. Jin Kuei let out a cold laugh. So what? Yiguchen said indifferently. Yiguchen was not surprised that Jin Kuei could sense Su Qingyu's presence. After all, a saint primordial spirit's perception was still very sharp. A saint primordial spirit is a great tonic. Jin Kuei sneered. Yiguchen suddenly understood. The ancient primordial spirit wanted to devour Su Qingyu's primordial spirit to strengthen its own strength. Obviously, Su Qingyu had heard the conversation as well. Just as he was about to appear, the space in the sacred palace distorted. Figures appeared one after another. They were Yi Tianqing and the others who had been teleported in. As soon as Yi Tianqing and the others entered, they saw Jin Kuei sitting on top of the pyramid. They immediately sensed that something was not right. At this moment, Hua Yuntao and the other false saints who had also been teleported in showed a relaxed smile on their faces. They immediately separated themselves from Heavenly Love, Jian Mister, and the others. Hua Yuntao, what is the meaning of this? Yi Tianqing asked calmly. Ha, it's all over. Yi Tianqing, your days of leading the Sword Dynasty have also come to an end. Hua Yuntao could not help but look up to the sky and laugh. Old man Hua, have you lost your mind? Wu Hongyan said coldly with a murderous look on her face. I have never been more clear-headed than today. Jin Kuei, our plan can be carried out completely. Hua Yuntao turned around and said. Jin Kuei, who was on top of the pyramid, responded faintly. He raised the compass in his hand. In an instant, the entire great formation of sky ruins was activated again, and a terrifying suppressive force fell on the faces of Yi Tianqing and the others. The seal of the great formation of sky ruins has been activated. You can't escape, and no one from the outside can break through the barrier to enter. Your final fate is to die here. Jinkuei's old and cold voice spread throughout the sacred palace. Chapter 1084. At this moment, Jinkuei was holding the compass in his hand. It was equivalent to controlling the entire great array of sky ruins. As the protective formation of the Void Sky Sacred Dynasty, the power of the great array of sky ruins was beyond doubt. Even after the baptism of time, the remaining power was still shocking enough. A terrifying suppressive force spread out and covered Yi Tianyin, Jian Fuzi, Wu Hongyan, and Gu Yuanxi, the four false saints. In an instant, the four experts felt the space being crushed. The strength of Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and the others was reduced by almost 30% in an instant. Heavenly Love was the strongest, but 20% of her strength was also suppressed. Jinkuei. No, this is the primordial spirit host body. Heavenly Love looked at Jinkuei. Naturally, she saw Jinkuei's strange state at the moment. She immediately thought of the primordial spirit host body, an ancient and evil technique. I see. I understand. Heavenly Love suddenly understood. She glanced at Hua Yuntao and the others and said, "Is this your plan?" Heavenly Love was quick-witted and wise, and she immediately understood the cause and effect. The pseudo-saint families had obviously discovered Jinkuei under some circumstances and reached a plan with Jinkuei. And the target of this plan was obviously Heavenly Love. After the Sword Path Alliance's leader, Proud Divine Prefecture, was trapped in the skyless Sword Realm. The entire Sword Dynasty was suppressed by Heavenly Love. Without Heavenly Love, the 5 pseudo-saint families would have been in charge of the Sword Dynasty. Therefore, Heavenly Love naturally became a thorn in the side of the pseudo-saint families. However, Heavenly Love's strength was considered top-notch among the pseudo-saints. The 5 pseudo-saint families had no confidence in eliminating Heavenly Love, so they could only wait for an opportunity. And the Sacred Dynasty's relic was undoubtedly the biggest opportunity. With Jinkuei controlling the great array of sky ruins, they could suppress Heavenly Love and the others and then kill them. Ha, Heavenly Love, don't you think it's a little too late to figure it out now? Hua Yuntao sneered. He didn't even address him as Vice Alliance Master and directly called him by his full name. Old Ghost Hua, you're too presumptuous. Confuzi said angrily. Right now, the Sword Dynasty is facing both internal and external threats, yet you still want to start a civil war? How foolish. Wu Hongyan scolded. Ah, there's no need to say anything more. In short, this place will be your burial ground. The Shangguan clan head, Shangguan Bo coldly said. There were 6 false saints on their side, plus Jinkuei and the Sky Market Array. Yi Tianqing and the others were in grave danger. I originally thought that no matter how selfish you were, you would still consider the Sword Alliance and the Sword Dynasty. Now it seems that I was wrong. Yi Tianqing's handsome face was covered in a layer of frost. As the deputy leader of the Sword Dao Alliance, he had already tried his best to be fair and just. Even though the fake saint family had many tricks up their sleeves, he wasn't too harsh on them. However, this kind of leniency was exchanged for a deadly plot. Even someone as calm as Yi Tianyin had a layer of frost on his face. There's nothing more to say. We can only fight them to the end, Gu Yuanxi said coldly. At this moment, Confuzi noticed Yi Guchen. Dugu Wubai, why are you here? Confuzi asked. Someone doesn't want me to leave. Yi Guchen shook his head. In the current situation, even Confuzi and the others would find it difficult to protect themselves. Not to mention Yi Guchen. If you want to fight, then fight, but there's no need to involve the younger generation, Confuzi said in a low voice. He was the dean of Sacred Cliff College, and Yi Guchen was the greatest pride of Sacred Cliff College. Confuzi naturally couldn't sit back and watch Yi Guchen die here. This kid is also someone I must eliminate. Hua Yuntao looked at Yi Guchen with extreme coldness. As a fake saint expert, he had lost face in front of Yi Guchen time and time again. Hua Yuntao's killing intent towards Yi Guchen had also reached its peak. Moreover, Ye Guqin's innate talent as a saint made Hua Yuntao extremely uneasy. He was not a fool. Naturally, he would not let the tiger return to the mountain and watch Ye Guqin grow up. Therefore, whether it was Yi Tianyin and the others, or Ye Guqin, Hua Yuntao had to kill them all today to completely eliminate any future troubles. Despicable old man. Wu Hongyan's charming face was filled with anger as she gritted her teeth. Yi Tianyin glanced at Ye Guqin from the corner of her eye, but a faint light flashed in her eyes. After I'm done with you, I'll personally end this little bastard. Hua Yuntao said coldly. Ye Guqin was obviously no threat to fake saints like them. The most important thing now was to deal with Yi Tianyin and the others. Go! Without any hesitation, Hua Yuntao and the others attacked. Since the plan had already been implemented, there was no reason to retreat. Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and Gu Yuanxi also attacked brazenly. Yi Tianyin sighed softly and stretched out her hand to grasp the void. As the air currents surged, an elegant silver-white blade appeared. It was Yi Tianyin's sword, Phoenix seeking Phoenix. This sword was the only memento left for her by that person. Yi Tianyin had originally planned to resign from her position as the deputy alliance leader after the Sword Dynasty stabilized and pursue that person. Now, it was hard to say whether she would live or die. Yi Tianyin gently stroked the blade of Phoenix seeking Phoenix with a faint gaze. I have no intention of killing, but the fighting doesn't stop. You 5 fake saint families are really ignorant. After Yi Tianyin finished speaking, the blade vibrated, and her aura surged. Although 20% of her strength was suppressed by the great formation of sky ruins, it was still extremely terrifying. Hua Yuntao and the others looked solemn. Next, a great battle unfolded in the sacred palace. The battle between false saint experts was astonishing. If not for the suppression of the great formation of sky ruins, the entire sacred palace would definitely be overturned in an instant by the airwaves and turned into ruins. Ye Guqin retreated to the bottom. He did not choose to escape because it was impossible for him to break through the barrier of the great formation of sky ruins. Even at his peak, he could not do it, let alone now that his divine dwelling had been destroyed and his combat strength had fallen to rock bottom. Yi Tianyin's strength is very strong. Ye Guqin looked up and muttered to himself. Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and the others were not weak among the fake saints. Yi Tianyin was slightly stronger than them and was almost at the saint realm. However, in the current situation, other than Yi Tianyin, the other 3 were not in good condition. After all, their enemies were 6 fake saints. In addition, their strength was suppressed by 30%. Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and Gu Yuanxi were injured not long after. Blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. Gu Yuanxi's strength was the weakest among the 4, and his injuries were also the most serious. Die! The 2 fake saints, Shengguanbo and Yinlingshan, looked at each other and burst out their monstrous cultivation base, using their trump cards. Sunrise Sword Codex. 9 Yin Slashing Sword. The 2 of them combined their moves and attacked Gu Yuanxi together. No! Confuzi and Wu Hongyan's expressions changed abruptly. They wanted to help, but they were firmly held back. Yi Tianyin was also restrained by the 2 fake saints and could not immediately rescue him. Boom! Accompanied by a roar, Gu Yuanxi's body burst open and blood spurted out. With a loud bang, the residual force left behind by the fake saint spread out. A fake saint expert exploded like a meteor and died. Chapter 1085. How important was a false saint expert? In the Nantian region, heavenly tribulation saints were rare and rarely appeared. If heavenly tribulation saints did not appear, then false saints were the strongest. Even if there was only one false saint expert in a dynasty, it could raise the entire dynasty to the level of a top-tier dynasty. This showed how rare and powerful a false saint expert was. However, at this moment, in front of Ye Guqin, a false saint expert had died just like that. Moreover, it was a false saint from the itinerant cultivator camp. This was a great loss to the entire Sword dynasty. Rumble. Gu Yuanxi's body exploded like a huge star, and at the same time, it released a terrifying shock wave. At the last moment of his life, Gu Yuanxi chose to self-destruct. The self-destruction of a false saint expert was extremely powerful. Shangguanbo and Yinlingshan, who were closest to him, were the first to bear the brunt of the shock wave. Puff! Both of them spat out a mouthful of blood and suffered serious injuries. Damn it, even death can't let us rest in peace. Both of them retreated continuously, and the blood in their chests was churning. With Gu Yuanxi's death, Yi Tianqing, Confuzi, and Wu Hongyan seemed to be in a worse position. There's no other way. Lord Sword King, we will do our best to delay them. Can you break the barrier and leave? Wu Hongyan looked at Yi Tianqing and said deeply. She had always admired Yi Tianqing and had a trace of affection for her. Yes, Lord Sword King, you are the hope of the entire Sword Dynasty. With you around, the Sword Dynasty will not completely fall apart. Confuzi said hurriedly. Wu Hongyan and Confuzi were both willing to sacrifice themselves to let Yi Tianqing leave. Below, Yi Guqin saw this scene and felt a little emotional. What kind of charisma did one have to make others willing to die for him? I, Sword Sovereign Yi Tianqing, am unable to do something like betraying my friends and running for my life. It's impossible for me to do that. Without the slightest hesitation, Heavenly Love rejected their suggestion. Yishanking was the Sword Sovereign, the deputy alliance leader of the Sword Dao Alliance, an existence that could suppress an entire dynasty. He would never let others die while he dragged out an ignoble existence. Hearing Yi Tianqing's words, Wu Hongyan's charming eyes flashed with a trace of infatuation. This was the Sword Sovereign that she liked. Ha, you don't have to shirk your responsibilities. Anyway, the three of you can't escape. Hua Yuntao said with a fake smile. You all have truly angered me. Yi Tianqing's words were cold. His eyebrows were cold, and his hand brushed past the silver sword. A powerful and terrifying sword essence spread out. Vaguely, it was as if the power of heaven and earth was gathering, causing a storm of sword chi to rise within the sacred hall. Could that be? Yi Guqin's eyes narrowed when he saw this. Yi Guqin was no stranger to this concept. It was the unity of heaven and man realm. The Sword Dao state of mind went from the heart of the sword to the unity of man and sword, and then to the unity of heaven and man. The unity of heaven and man realm was undoubtedly the most difficult state to comprehend. Even though Yi Guqin had comprehended the unity of man and sword for a long time, he still needed a long time to comprehend the unity of heaven and man realm. Back in the infinite planes, Feng Manlu had sacrificed himself and used the unity of heaven and man realm to perform the ultimate sword move and defeat the supremacies. Now, Yi Guqin finally saw the unity of heaven and man realm from Yi Tianqing again. Sacred Heart Sword Momentum, Heavenly Spirit Sword Illusion. Yi Tianqing suddenly stabbed out, and countless illusory swords appeared in the surrounding void. Along with the unity of heaven and man realm sword momentum, it released a powerful force that swept toward Hua Yuntao and the other pseudo-saints. Rumble. The battle broke out again. This time, Yi Tianqing attacked with all his might and no longer held back. Even with the suppression of the great array of heaven, Yi Tianqing's combat strength was so powerful that Hua Yuntao and the others were shocked. Both of you deserve to die. Yi Tianqing's sword move focused on Shangguanbo and Yinlingshan. Because it was these two people who had caused Gu Yuanxi's death. Moreover, Shangguanbo and Yinlingshan were both injured, so it was even more difficult for them to resist Yi Tianqing's move. Sacred Heart Sword Momentum, Heavenly Path Sword Abyss. Yi Tianqing held the phoenix-seeking phoenix in her hand and slashed down. Sword chi suddenly erupted, as if it had cut open an abyss. Damn it! Shangguanbo and Yinlingshan both vomited blood, and blood spurted out from their bodies. Even if they resisted with all their might, it would be difficult for them to block Yi Tianqing's ultimate move. Yi Tianqing, don't be so arrogant. Hua Yuntao and the others saw this and charged forward. However, Confuzi and Wu Hongyan desperately tried to hold back the four people who wanted to save them. Sacred Heart Sword Momentum, Heavens Will Sword Extinction. Yi Tianqing raised her hand, and the silver-white blade buzzed and trembled. That was the cold sound of killing intent. Facing the two false saints who had killed Gu Yuanxi, the killing intent in Yi Tianqing's heart had reached its peak. Terrifying sword chi spread out. This move was considered an extremely powerful killer move even among the Sacred Heart Sword Momentum. The sword slashed down, as if it was the will of heaven that was merciless, cutting off one's life. No! Shangguan Bo and Yinling Shan roared angrily and also used their trump cards. However, they were injured, and they were no match for Yi Tianqing at all. Puchi! The sword slashed down, and blood splattered. Two heads flew out, and blood spurted into the sky. Two false saint experts had fallen. And in this tragic scene of blood flying, Yi Tianqing's long hair fluttered, and her white robe fluttered. She was like a celestial being, and the sword in her hand was not stained with a drop of blood. Yi Tianqing slaughtered the world with her sword. This was Yi Tianqing's true style. This expert who had suppressed the sword dynasty with her own strength. It was fine if she did not use her sword, but once she did, she killed until the false saints trembled in fear. That's great. Wu Hongyan's beautiful eyes were filled with joy. Yi Tianqing had killed two false saints with a single slash, so there were only 4 false saints left, including Hua Yuntao. The threat would be greatly reduced. Damn it, Hua Yuntao could not help but curse. Yi Tianqing's strength had greatly exceeded his expectations. Yi Tianqing had always been low-key, so Hua Yuntao and the others had misjudged her strength. Jiankui, are you still watching? Hua Yuntao shouted sternly. Hua Yuntao's shout made Wu Hongyan and Confuzi's hearts sink again. Ha, you guys are really useless. Jiankui let out an old chuckle, which seemed exceptionally strange. Then, he raised the compass in his hand again, and an even more terrifying array formation power spread out. The entire sky market array rumbled and rotated again. Endless light rose from the ground into the sky. From the light, the figure of an ancient giant in heavy armor walked out. This ancient giant held a giant axe and exuded a powerful and terrifying aura. That's the spirit of the array. Wu Hongyan's beautiful face turned pale. Arrays were divided into 3 grades, heaven, earth, and human. Earth grade and above arrays could condense the spirit of the array. For example, Yiguchen's 6 Dao Azura sword formation could condense the spirit of Azura. The 5 Emperors' Cosmos sword formation could condense the spirits of the 5 elements. This powerful ancient giant in front of them was the spirit of the Sky Market Array. Yiguchen did not know what grade the Sky Market Array was. But it was obviously more powerful than the 2 arrays he had. Chapter 1086. As Jinkui summoned the formation spirit of the Great Array of Sky Market, the battle situation that had eased up became dangerous once again. It could be said that this ancient giant's strength was absolutely comparable to both Shangguan Bo and Yinling Shan. More importantly, the primordial giant was only the formation spirit, not a body of flesh and blood. Therefore, it would not be injured. It would only attack without fear of death. Under Jinkui's control, the primordial giant chopped down at Heavenly Love with its giant axe. Heavenly Love swept across, and the sword radiance spread out, colliding with the primordial giant's giant axe. A rumbling sound erupted as the giant axe broke through Heavenly Love's sword light as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It directly collided with the tip of the sword. In front of the primordial giant's huge body, Heavenly Love was like a small dot. However, Heavenly Love withstood the primordial giant's attack. However, it was only withstanding the attack. Heavenly Love could not cause any substantial damage to the primordial giant. Wu Hongyan and the Sword Master, on the other hand, were in grave danger. The suppressive force on them had increased again. The 2 of them had already had 40% of their strength suppressed. With only 60% of their strength left, it was difficult for them to deal with Hua Yuntao and the other false saints. Boom! After another collision, Wu Hongyan coughed out some blood from her red lips. She was as beautiful as a flower. Her aura had already fallen to rock bottom. On the other side, Confuzi was in a similar situation. Ha, heavenly love, you can only watch as they die, but you can't do anything to save them. Hua Yuntao laughed. You. Heavenly love's eyebrows were gloomy. The primordial giant was holding him back. He could not save Confuzi and Wu Hongyan. Sword King, don't worry about us. Wu Hongyan shouted. She did not want to distract heavenly love. Even if she died, Wu Hongyan would not drag heavenly love down. Below, Yi Guchen frowned. To be honest, he also wanted to help heavenly love and the other two. However, even if Yi Guchen was in his best condition, he could not intervene in a battle of this level. Not to mention now. What should I do? I can't just sit and watch. Yi Guchen frowned. When he first came to the Sword Dynasty, heavenly love knew his identity. Not only did she not expose him, but she was also willing to help Yi Guchen hide his identity. As the dean of Sacred Cliff College, Confuzi also took care of Yi Guchen. As for Wu Hongyan, when Yi Guchen was being suppressed by Hua Yuntao, it could be said that Yi Guchen was indebted to all three of them. Yi Guchen knew that he wasn't a good person, but he wasn't an ungrateful person either. He couldn't just sit by and watch Jian Mister and Wu Hongyan die. At this moment, Su Qingyu's voice rang in Yi Guchen's mind. Yi Guchen, do you really want to save them? Of course. I wonder if you have any ideas, Senior. Yi Guchen said in his mind. Yi Guchen had never asked Su Qingyu for help. However, Su Qingyu was probably the only one who could do it now. It's not like there's no other way. Didn't you get a soul source crystal? Although my primordial spirit is weak, I might be able to use part of its power with the support of the soul source crystal, Su Qingyu said. Su Qingyu was a saint's primordial spirit. Even if he could only use part of its power, he might be able to threaten Hua Yuntao and the rest. Let's do that then, Yi Guchen agreed without hesitation. What about your clone? Su Qingyu hesitated. If we can get out of this crisis, we might be able to get the soul source crystal from the other saints' corpses, Yi Guchen said. There were a total of 7 saints' corpses on the pyramid. He and Huang Qianqiu each searched for a corpse. There were 5 corpses left. As long as there was a soul source crystal in one of the 5 corpses, there would be no problem. Alright then. Put the soul source crystal between your eyebrows, Su Qingyu said. Yi Guchen took out a crystal the size of a pigeon's egg. It was the soul source crystal. He placed it between his eyebrows. Suddenly, a terrifying wave of soul energy as vast as the sea poured into Yi Guchen's mind. With Yi Guchen's mind, it was impossible for him to digest such a vast amount of soul energy in a short period of time. His sea of consciousness might even explode from the pressure. However, a suction force appeared and devoured the vast amount of energy. Su Qingyu's primordial spirit had been attacked by the saints in the Tianhuang Plains and had been in a weak state. At this moment, after absorbing the power of the soul source crystal, Su Qingyu's primordial spirit could unleash a great amount of power in a short period of time. On the other side, Confuzi and Wu Hongyan were both covered in blood. Hua Yuntao and the other 3 false saints did not hold back at all. Their attacks were almost fatal. Wu Hongyan, it was you who stopped me from dealing with that little bastard. You didn't expect to be reduced to such a state, did you? Hua Yuntao attacked Wu Hongyan with his palm. Wu Hongyan's strength was suppressed by 40% and she was injured. This attack caused her to fall back again. Her red lips were stained with blood. I will never regret it. Even if I have to do it again, I will still stop you, you old bastard. Wu Hongyan shouted coldly. Her flawless face was full of coldness. Well, as the saying goes, beautiful women are ill-fated. Then go to hell. Hua Yuntao did not say anything else. He and another false saint of the Hua family, Hua Yunhai, attacked Wu Hongyan at the same time. Wu Hongyan's face was cold, but there was a touch of bitterness at the corner of her mouth. She was indeed close to dying and had no more combat power. It was impossible for her to block the attacks of Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai. Confuzi could not even protect himself. Yi Tianqing was tied down by the ancient giant. No one could help her. Am I going to die? Wu Hongyan thought. She was not afraid of death, but she felt a little regretful and unwilling. Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai's joint attacks were about to land on her. Just as Wu Hongyan was about to choose to self-destruct. The sound of wind breaking suddenly rang in her ears. Soon after, Wu Hongyan felt her waist being held by someone. Her entire body was in that person's embrace. Sword King, Wu Hongyan's instinctive reaction was Yi Tianqing. But when she took a closer look, she saw a calm and handsome side profile. Dugu Wu Bai. Wu Hongyan was slightly stunned. She had never thought that it was Yi Guqin who saved her. You little bastard, are you in such a hurry to die? Hua Yuntao's face darkened when he saw that Yi Guqin had helped Wu Hongyan avoid the attack. Dugu Wu Bai, find a way to leave. This is not a battle you can participate in. Wu Hongyan hurriedly said. Wu Hongyan felt a little unnatural being held in the arms of a young man who was younger than her. A faint blush appeared on her face. But at this moment, she was more concerned about Yi Guqin's safety. A battle of this level was not something that Yi Guqin could get involved in. Dean Wu, you have helped me before. How can I sit back and watch you get hurt? Yi Guqin said calmly, without a trace of panic. Wu Hongyan's face froze, and then she chuckled. You are so stubborn. If I had not met Sword King, I might have fallen in love with you. Wu Hongyan's beautiful face, which was as beautiful as a fox fairy, had a sweet smile. Wu Hongyan was probably the only one who could still crack a joke in such a situation. Dean Wu, you must be joking, Yi Guqin said calmly. Seeing that Wu Hongyan and Yi Guqin did not seem to care about him at all, Hua Yuntao's veins throbbed on his forehead. He shouted coldly, die. He and Hua Yunhai attacked Yi Guqin and Wu Hongyan again. You are the ones who are courting death. Yi Guqin's eyes shone with a cold light. A terrifying saint-level soul power was brewing in his body. Chapter 1087. In the face of Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai's attacks, Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with a cold light. Instead, he slowly raised a hand and collided with their attacks. Little bastard, are you scared out of your wits? Hua Yuntao sneered when he saw that Yi Guqin did not retreat and even faced their attacks head-on. What kind of existences were they? They were dignified false saints. Even if Yi Guqin was a natural saint and had extraordinary strength among the younger generation, he was still a false saint. In front of a false saint expert, he was still extremely weak and did not have the slightest ability to resist. Dugu Wu Bai, get out of the way. Confuzi's expression changed and he hurriedly shouted. If it was possible, he naturally didn't want Yi Guqin to die. You're so silly. No wonder Xingzhu acknowledged you as her master. Wu Hongyan shook her head. She finally understood why Mu Xingzhu would rather reject her, a false saint expert, and follow Yi Guqin. Wu Hongyan finally experienced Yi Guqin's charisma. Dean Wu, don't you think it's too early to despair? Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent as he laughed softly. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying force spread out from his body. This force was not genuine qi, but soul power. It was so powerful that it even caused the surrounding void to distort slightly. In the next moment, Yi Guqin, Hua Yuntao, and Hua Yunhai's attacks collided. Immediately, there was an earth-shattering roar and a terrifying shockwave spread out like a wave, causing the surrounding void to tremble and ripple. In the collision, it was not Yi Guqin who was pushed back, but Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai. Yi Guqin's face was cold as he slapped Hua Yuntao with one hand. Pa! Hua Yuntao was caught off guard and was sent flying again. He felt that his neck was about to be dislocated and his old face was almost smashed. The corner of his mouth was broken and blood was flowing out. This, not to mention Hua Yuntao, Hua Yunhai, Ouyang Su, and Jiang Wu, these 4 false saints. Even Confuzi and Wu Hongyan were stunned. Ye Guqin had actually repelled the combined attack of Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai. And he even sent Hua Yuntao flying with a slap. Wu Hongyan's red lips parted slightly. She felt like she was in a dream. At this moment, the pressure that was faintly emitted from Ye Guqin's body made her feel a strange fear. That feeling, it was as if he was facing a real heavenly tribulation sage. How can this be? How can he have the aura of a saint? Wu Hongyan was stunned. Her delicate and charming face was stunned. Damn it, little bastard. How can this be? Hua Yuntao was stunned at first. He felt like he was dreaming, but then he came to his senses. His old face was filled with shame and anger. His lungs were about to explode. He, a false saint expert of the Hua family, was slapped by a junior. What's going on? This kid is strange. Hua Yuntao's face became serious. Ouyang Su and Jiang Wu were even more surprised. They could not help but stop and look at Ye Guqin. On the other side, Yi Tianqing also noticed Ye Guqin's situation. Could it be? She immediately thought of a possibility. Dugu Wubai, why are you? Wu Hongyan was still confused. Dean Wu, I told you that I won't let anything happen to you. Leave the rest to me. Ye Guqin smiled faintly. Confuzi also rushed to Ye Guqin's side. Like Yi Tianqing, he knew Ye Guqin's true identity and vaguely guessed the reason. Dugu Wubai, what kind of trick did you use? Ouyang Su, the great elder of the Ouyang family, said coldly. Ye Guqin had killed Ouyang Fengyun and Ouyang Tianji, so he was an enemy of the Ouyang family. However, before Ye Guqin could speak, Jinkui, who was sitting cross-legged on the pyramid and controlling the great array of Sky Market, spoke. Interesting. I didn't expect the primordial spirit in your body to have such combat strength. What? Primordial spirit? Dugu Wubai has a saint primordial spirit? Jiankui's words shocked Hua Yuntao and the other false saints. Although a saint primordial spirit had lost its physical body, its strength was still not to be underestimated. Even a false saint would be wary of it. Ha! An illusory figure appeared behind Ye Guqin. He was dressed in green and had a handsome face. Although his expression was calm, the majesty of a saint could be vaguely seen between his brows. It was Su Qingyu's primordial spirit. This is... Wu Hongyan was slightly stunned. From the first time she saw Ye Guqin, she felt that this young man had hidden his strength well. However, she did not expect Ye Guqin to have a saint primordial spirit in his body. Where did he come from? Who are you? Hua Yuntao's face was extremely gloomy at this moment. The originally perfect plan had a huge change because of Su Qingyu's appearance. Hua Yuntao was not stupid. He knew that Ye Guqin's background was not that simple. An ordinary young man with no background could pass the 20th level of Mount Saint Crossing? Could he set records in the Sword Dynasty? Could he hide a saint primordial spirit? You will find out. Ye Guqin did not say clearly. He turned to Su Qingyu and said, Senior Su, I'll have to trouble you. No problem. It's just a small matter. Su Qingyu had a casual smile on his face. Although he only had a primordial spirit, with the help of the Soul Source Crystal, Su Qingyu could unleash a huge amount of power in a short period of time. Boom! Su Qingyu raised his hand, and a terrifying soul power spread out, twisting the void in front of him slightly. Heavenly Tribulation Saints comprehended the power of laws. Every move of theirs had the power to destroy heaven and earth and shatter the void. Damn it! Hua Yuntao and the other false saints' faces were extremely gloomy. Su Qingyu alone could almost suppress the 4 of them. Seeing this, Confuzi attacked again. He knew Yiguchen's identity, and he also knew that this saint primordial spirit should be the youngest heavenly tribulation saint of the Su family, Su Qingyu, who had appeared in the Tianhuang plain. In the next battle, Tian Qing fought against the formation spirit of the Sky Market Formation. Su Qingyu suppressed Hua Yuntao and the other false saints by himself. Confuzi assisted from the side. Wu Hongyan, who had lost most of her combat power, swallowed an elixir and began to recuperate. Dugu Wubai, you're really unpredictable, Wu Hongyan said with a complicated look in her eyes. She had never thought that she would be saved by Yiguchen one day. Now Wu Hongyan was a little glad that she had meddled in other people's business and helped Yiguchen. On the other side of the battle, Su Qingyu was almost unstoppable. He was a saint primordial spirit, and the suppression power of the Sky Market Formation had little effect on him. With the help of the Soul Source Crystal, Su Qingyu's combat power was unparalleled. Puff! Su Qingyu reached out one hand, and the space twisted, and directly crushed the body of the Ouyang family's first elder into pieces. Then, Jiang Wu of the Jiang family was also crushed by Su Qingyu. Hua Yunhai was severely injured by Su Qingyu, and his arm was torn by the power of space. Hua Yuntao was even more miserable. His sea of consciousness was affected by the power of Su Qingyu's primordial spirit, and it was almost torn apart. Jinkue, the plan is about to fail. Can you still sit still? Hua Yuntao couldn't help but shout. Su Qingyu was a saint primordial spirit. But don't forget that the one who had taken over Jiankue's body was also an ancient saint primordial spirit of the ruined Sky Holy Dynasty. Humph. I knew you were unreliable. What a bunch of trash. Jiankue sneered. Chapter 1088. The current situation was extremely disadvantageous for Jiankue, Hua Yuntao, and the others. However, under such a situation, Sword Leader was still calm and composed, and he sat steadily on the fishing platform. Hua Yuntao's face darkened when he heard Jiankue call them trash, but he didn't refute. The most important thing now was to get rid of Yiguchen, Tianqing, and the others. Yiguchen also noticed that Jiankue's state was a little strange. He didn't seem to care about Hua Yuntao and the others at all. It was as if he could deal with all of them by himself. Jiankue turned to Yiguchen and said indifferently, "Boy, you've indeed exceeded my expectations, but unfortunately, this won't change anything. All of you will die, and this saint's primordial spirit will also be devoured by me." Jiankue sneered. "Humph, if you want to devour me, let's see if you have the ability to do so." Su Qingyu snorted, and the surrounding void shook. He was the youngest heavenly tribulation saint in the Su family, so he naturally had his own pride. Even if the primordial spirit that possessed Jiankue came from the ruined Sky Sacred Dynasty, he wasn't afraid at all. "Ha, you'll see what I'm capable of." Jiankue raised the compass in his hand again. As the compass rotated, the pyramid began to rumble and tremble. The entire pyramid slowly opened like a flower bud. As the pyramid opened, a pitch-black, chaotic, and terrifying aura spread out from within. This fluctuation. Su Qingyu's face was solemn. The fluctuation contained a demonic intent, and at the same time, it had some effect on his saint primordial spirit. What's going on? Even Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai were shocked. This wasn't part of their plan. With a loud crack, the entire pyramid opened completely. In the end, the sealed prison was finally opened. Yiguchen looked around and saw that there were a total of 999 chains inside the pyramid. There was a figure who was sitting cross-legged inside the pyramid. The figure sitting cross-legged had an extremely long head of white hair that covered his face. He was skinny like a withered corpse, and he emitted a silent spiritual fluctuation. He seemed to be repelled by the world. There's actually a saint's corpse suppressed at the bottom of the pyramid? Yiguchen's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. However, this corpse was obviously different from the 7 saint corpses at the top of the pyramid. It looked like the 7 saint corpses were suppressing this corpse at the bottom of the pyramid. But what was the identity of this corpse that it needed 7 saints to suppress it at the same time? Ha, I'm finally about to succeed. Ancient existence of the dark world, please let your will fuse with mine. Jiankuei looked up to the sky and roared. A terrifying saint primordial spirit power spread out as if it was going to resonate with the white-haired figure. Oh no, could that be? Su Qingyu seemed to have remembered something, and his eyes were unprecedentedly serious. Even if a real saint was here, Su Qingyu would never lose his composure like this. Senior Su, what's going on? Yi Guqin asked. Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai were also surprised. Obviously, this wasn't part of their and Jiankuei's plan. I was wondering how the host primordial spirit could survive for so long, but now I understand, Su Qingyu said in a low voice. He had been wondering how the primordial spirit could survive for so long without any external help. Now, Su Qingyu understood. Then what's going on? Yi Guqin also felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed. I didn't think of it at first, but he mentioned the dark world. Su Qingyu looked very serious. What's the dark world? Yi Guqin was completely confused. The dark world is ancient history, and now it's only recorded in ancient books. It's rumored that the dark world is a different space independent of the 9 regions, and there are many terrifying and powerful foreign tribes living in it. A long time ago, the 100 tribes of all heavens had a great war with the foreign tribes of the dark world, Su Qingyu said. In fact, this was only some of the records in the Su family's library. Although Su Qingyu was a saint, he was actually very young and hadn't experienced that ancient history. The 100 tribes of all heavens, the foreign tribes of the dark world, could it be? Yi Guqin thought in his heart and suddenly remembered. When the heavenly I King and the chaotic world demonic ape were fighting, he also said that the chaotic world demonic ape clan had betrayed all heavens and joined the foreign tribes. Could the foreign tribes that the heavenly I King mentioned be the foreign tribes of the dark world? Yi Guqin suddenly understood. If that was the case, everything made sense. The destruction of the Void Sky Holy Dynasty was probably related to the foreign tribes of the dark world. And this pyramid was the place where the foreign tribes of the dark world were suppressed. The same primordial spirit that had taken over Jiankuei's body was most likely corrupted by the foreign tribe's special power and eventually demonized. Otherwise, it wouldn't have wanted to merge with the foreign tribes of the dark world at the bottom of the pyramid. What's going on? Let's leave first. Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai both felt that something was wrong. Their figures flashed, and they wanted to leave. However, no one could break through the barrier of the great array of Sky Market. Not even a false saint could do it. Ha, none of you can leave, the sword chief let out a bone-chilling laugh. Endless waves of black chi suddenly rose from the white-haired foreign tribe's corpse at the bottom of the pyramid. As it rolled, it seemed that a huge and terrifying demonic shadow had appeared. The sword chief stood up, and his entire body directly jumped into the pitch-black air wave. I'm finally going to succeed. I knew it. I won't die. I'll never die. Jiankuei laughed maniacally. However, the next moment, Jiankuei spoke in a hoarse voice that was extremely harsh. I said that as long as you merge with me, you'll never die, this voice. Yi Guqin's eyes narrowed. It was obvious that this voice belonged to the white-haired foreign tribes. As expected, it seems that one of the 7 saints suppressing the alien race in the dark world was disloyal and didn't want to die just like that. In the end, the white-haired alien race took advantage of the situation and demonized him. It's also because of the white-haired foreign tribe's help that the saint's primordial spirit could be preserved for so long. Su Qingyu's doubts were completely dispelled. However, this made his eyes even more solemn. The foreign tribes of the dark world were synonymous with power, strangeness, and terror. Even Su Qingyu had never encountered a member of the dark world. Su Qingyu didn't make a move because the foreign tribes of the dark world were too strange. They were even faintly affecting his primordial spirit. I am Soul Annihilating Flame of the Soul Devourer clan. It's your honor to be devoured by me. Jiankuei's dark golden hair slowly turned snowy white as he spoke. He raised his hand and took off the bronze mask on his face, revealing a cold face. His eyes were pure black, without the slightest hint of white. The saint's primordial spirit had completely merged with soul-annihilating flame of the Soul Devourer clan. A huge calamity was about to befall them. Chapter 1089. The barrier of the great array of sky ruins had sealed the entire sacred dynasty's treasure within. At that moment, no one was able to escape. At this moment, Jinkui, or rather, Han Miayen, scanned everyone with his cold black eyes. As the compass lost control, the primordial giant also disappeared. Yi Tianqing was finally free to return to Yiguchen's side. However, the situation did not improve much. Even if Yi Tianqing and Su Qingyu joined forces, they would not be able to gain any advantage over Han Miayen. After all, Han Miayen had merged with a saint's primordial spirit. When the two merged, the energy waves emitted caused the surrounding void to faintly reveal pitch-black cracks. This showed how powerful it was. What kind of monster is this? Even Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai were stunned. They knew that Jinkui would be possessed by the ancient primordial spirit of the Void Sky Sacred Dynasty. However, they did not expect that the ancient primordial spirit had been corrupted and demonized by the soul-devouring clan. At this moment, Han Miayan's release was even more unexpected. However, the two of them looked at each other and calmed down. Their plans still had to be carried out. Thinking of this, Hua Yunhai took a step forward and said, Jinkui, no matter what state you are in now, we can't afford to fail our plan. Upon hearing Hua Yunhai's words, Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and the others all glared at him. What kind of situation was this? Even the ancient and terrifying enemy of all heavens, the alien race from the dark world, had appeared. Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai still wanted to use Han Miayan's power to deal with Yi Tianqing and the others. At this moment, even Su Qingyu frowned slightly. The alien race from the dark world was everyone's enemy. If they appeared in the South Horizon region, they would immediately be besieged. Now, not only did Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai not think of how to make up for their mistakes and deal with Han Miayan, but they wanted to continue their plan to kill Yi Tianqing and the others. This was really infuriating. Ha! Han Miayan let out a cold laugh. He looked at Hua Yunhai with his pure black eyes and reached out his hand. An incomparably terrifying soul fluctuation spread out. Yuan devouring explosion. A powerful soul vibration force blasted into Hua Yunhai's sea of consciousness. In the blink of an eye, Hua Yunhai's sea of consciousness exploded. His entire head exploded. Red and white matter splattered everywhere as his headless corpse fell to the ground. Dead silence, the atmosphere in the holy temple froze. The soul-extinguishing flame had instantly killed a false saint expert. Hua Yuntao's old face was completely stiff, and he felt a chill run down his spine. You! What are you doing? Hua Yuntao's old eyes showed fear for the first time. As a high and mighty false saint expert, this was the first time he felt so close to death. Even a false saint expert had such a weak moment. What a bunch of trash. Originally, after I obtained the position of ruler of the Sword Dynasty, I could have made you all my subordinates. However, you all are indeed a bunch of trash. You are simply unqualified to follow me. The soul-extinguishing flame said coldly as he opened his mouth. Transparent soul power was sucked into his mouth. It was the energy in Hua Yunhai's sea of consciousness. As the name suggested, the soul-devouring clan devoured souls. Their clan was very talented in the Tao of the soul and primordial spirit. The situation is not good, Su Qingyu said in a low voice. Senior, are you not confident? Yi Guchen also frowned. If I had a physical body, I would not be afraid. However, I am only in the primordial spirit state now. Although I have not met the soul-devouring clan before, I have seen them in my family's records. This foreign clan is proficient in all kinds of soul Tao. Now that I am facing the soul-devouring clan in the primordial spirit state, I am using my weakness to attack their strength. The meaning of Su Qingyu's words was very simple. The soul-devouring clan's soul Tao was just right to counter his saint primordial spirit. Ha! A saint primordial spirit is a great tonic. The soul-extinguishing flame laughed coldly. He did not attack Hua Yuntao again. After all, he could kill Hua Yuntao at any time. What the soul-extinguishing flame cared about was Su Qingyu's saint primordial spirit. If he devoured Su Qingyu's primordial spirit, his strength would skyrocket. At that time, it would be possible for him to recover his former strength. I have not fought with the Dark World's foreign clan before. I wonder if you are as terrifying as the records say. Su Qingyu smiled. Although the current battle was not in his favor, Su Qingyu was not afraid. I will attack too. Heavenly Sentiment also chose to attack. Su Qingyu nodded and did not refuse. He was not confident that he could defeat the soul-extinguishing flame alone. Then, the battle began again. Su Qingyu stretched out his hand and a powerful soul Dao fluctuation distorted the void and blasted toward Jiankuei. Evil primordial puppet. The soul-extinguishing flame also attacked. A black soul Dao fluctuation swept out and filled the space in front of him with cracks. Sacred Heart Sword Form, Benevolent Sword Pinnacle. Heavenly Sentiment also attacked. His strength was stronger than Confuzi and the other false saint experts. He was close to the saint realm. Even so, he did not have any advantage against the soul-extinguishing flame. On the other side, Hua Yuntao's eyes were filled with despair. He could not escape from the great array of Sky Market. Even if the soul-extinguishing flame killed Heavenly Sentiment and the others in the end, Hua Yuntao would not be able to escape death. Judging from the soul-extinguishing flame's tone, he had no intention of letting him live. Ha! I did not expect that I would be buried here with all of you in the end. Hua Yuntao smiled bitterly. Isn't it because you were blinded by greed? If not, why would you dig your own grave? Confuzi shouted coldly. Who says that we will die until the last moment? Yi Guchen's face was solemn. Humph, you little bastard. I really admire you a little. Death is at hand, but you did not give up. Hua Yuntao smiled coldly. Yi Guchen shook his head and did not answer. In the infinite planes, Yi Guchen did not give up even when he was facing certain death. In the end, he was rescued from the jaws of death. Now, Yi Guchen was the same. Rumble. At this moment, there was another change in the battle. Great God-devouring skill. The soul-extinguishing flame performed the soul-devouring clan's skill. A huge black hole appeared above his head as if it could devour everything. As soon as the black hole appeared, Su Qingyu immediately felt that his primordial spirit was unstable. Ha! My clan's great God-devouring skill targets the primordial spirit in the sea of consciousness, the soul-extinguishing flame said coldly. The great God-devouring skill was very effective against Su Qingyu's primordial spirit. On the other side, Heavenly Sentiment attacked again. A powerful sword light pierced through the void and stabbed toward the soul-extinguishing flame. The soul-extinguishing flame's other hand clenched into a fist again. A mass of black light burst out and blocked Heavenly Sentiment's move. Su Qingyu's primordial spirit was suppressed by the great God-devouring skill. His entire body became faintly illusory, like a candle in the wind. However, at this moment, Yi Guchen looked at the black hole and suddenly had an idea. Maybe there is a way to deal with the soul-extinguishing flame. Yi Guchen thought in his heart. Chapter 1090. Looking at the black hole released by the soul-extinguishing flame, Yi Guchen suddenly thought of the immemorial demon sword that had been silent in his Dantian, the God-Devourer. Ever since Yi Guchen obtained the God-Devourer, he had never had the chance to use it, nor did he have the ability to use it. Unless he refined a clone, Yi Guchen could use the God-Devourer. But now, Yi Guchen suddenly thought that if he gave the God-Devourer to Yi Tianqing, he might be able to resolve the current crisis. If others knew about this idea, they would definitely think it was crazy. What kind of existence was the immemorial demon sword? It was a rare divine weapon. Looking at the 9 regions and even the wider world, there were only 108 immemorial demon swords. Even if the God Devourer was only on the Earth roll. Even if it was only ranked 34th among the 72 swords on the Earth roll. But this still could not hide its rare value. If it were not for the immemorial demon sword, the matter of the Tianhuang Plains would not have spread throughout the Nantian region. It could be said that the reason why Yiguchen's name could spread throughout the Nantian region was largely because Yiguchen had the immemorial demon sword. And now, Yiguchen wanted to give the immemorial demon sword to another person. This was definitely a crazy idea. Although Yi Tianqing knew Yiguchen's identity, she did not have the intention to seize the God Devourer. But who knew if Yi Tianqing would go back on her words after obtaining the immemorial demon sword? The attraction of an immemorial demon sword was too great. Even the heavenly tribulation saints of the overlord forces would go crazy for it. Rumble. The black hole released by the soul-extinguishing flame suppressed Su Qingyu, preventing him from using his full strength. Su Qingyu's primordial spirit was being pulled into the black hole step by step. On the other side, although Yi Tianqing tried her best, she was still unable to cause any substantial damage to the soul-extinguishing flame. It's almost over. Hua Yuntao smiled sadly. When Su Qingyu was devoured, the next one would be Yi Tianqing. Then everyone else would be killed and devoured by the soul-extinguishing flame. Senior Heaven Sentiment. Yiguchen suddenly shouted. Heavenly Sentiment turned to look at Yiguchen. He seemed to have thought of something as his eyes flashed. In fact, Heavenly Sentiment already had this thought long ago. She wanted to borrow the primordial famed sword. But he didn't do that. This was because the famed ancient swords were simply too precious. If it was him, if he obtained the famed ancient sword, he would definitely not give it to others to use. She wouldn't even let anyone touch her. At this moment, when she heard Yiguchen call out to her, Yi Tianqing understood. Yiguchen was willing to temporarily hand over his primordial sword to Heavenly Love. Senior Heavenly Sentiment, I'll leave it to you. Yiguchen began to activate the God Devourer sword in his dantian. Although he could not use the power of the God Devourer sword, it was not a problem for him to use it. As for why he didn't give it to Su Qingyu. This was because Su Qingyu was a primordial spirit, so it was difficult for him to unleash the power of the God Devourer sword. A futile struggle. Hua Yuntao saw Yiguchen's actions and shook his head as he muttered to himself. He was already in complete despair. However, to be able to make Heavenly Sentiment and the others die with him, it could be considered as completing the mission. Yiguchen tried his best to focus his mind on his dantian. The demon sword that had been silent all this time began to buzz and tremble when it sensed something. Out! Yiguchen yelled and slapped his own abdomen with his palm. Then, he stretched out his hand and grabbed fiercely. A section of the sword hilt fell into Yiguchen's hand. Then, under the watchful eyes of Wu Hongyan, Confuzi, Hua Yuntao, and the others at the side, the pitch-black demon sword was pulled out of Yiguchen's body inch by inch. That visual shock caused one's heart to tremble. What is that kid trying to do again? Hua Yuntao's old eyes narrowed. It could be said that the reason why this perfect plan had changed was largely because of Yiguchen. But now, Hua Yuntao did not think that Yiguchen had any means to turn the situation around. After all, their opponent was the Dark World's alien race. Wu Hongyan's face was also filled with a trace of confusion. She did not know Yiguchen's identity, so she did not know what means Yiguchen had. As for Confuzi, his old eyes narrowed at this moment. He knew Yiguchen's identity and seemed to understand what means Yiguchen was going to use. As time passed, Yiguchen finally pulled the God Devourer sword out of his body inch by inch. The God Devourer sword was pitch black and covered with demonic patterns and bright red blood grooves. The entire sword's shape was savage and ferocious, and it was covered with protruding thorns. At the guard of the sword, there was an open beast's mouth, and chaotic fog was rolling in it. It was like the entrance of a black hole. As soon as the demonic sword was pulled out, the entire sacred palace seemed to be unable to withstand the vast demonic power and immediately began to rumble and shake as if it was going to collapse completely. The aura of the demonic sword even caused the great array of sky ruins to hum and tremble. That is. Wu Hongyan and Hua Yuntao, who were in the distance, were shocked. The pitch-black demonic sword that Yi Guqin had pulled out made them feel extremely fearful, as if they were being stared at by an ancient giant beast. Is this the immemorial demonic sword? Confuzi saw this and sighed deeply. The immemorial demonic sword? What is going on? Who is Dugu Wubai? Wu Hongyan's face was filled with astonishment when she heard this. There is nothing to hide now. Dugu Wubai is Yi Guqin, who stirred up endless storms in the infinite plains, Confuzi said. What? He is Yi Guqin. Wu Hongyan's beautiful eyes widened. Even with her identity as a false saint expert, she could not help but gasp. This was really too surprising. How is that possible? That little bastard is Yi Guqin. Could that sword be? Hua Yuntao also heard Confuzi's words, and his old face froze. When his gaze fell on the God Devourer's sword, there was an extremely fiery look in his eyes. The immemorial demonic sword. Is that the immemorial demonic sword? Hua Yuntao almost could not hold back and wanted to directly snatch the sword in Yi Guqin's hand. However, he knew that Confuzi would definitely stop him. Senior Etianqing, take this sword. Yi Guqin held the God Devourer's sword in his hand and directly threw it to Etianqing. After just holding it for a while, Yi Guqin felt a demonic intent corroding his mind. Even with Yi Guqin's temperament, it was difficult for him to resist this demonic nature. This showed how great the influence of the God Devourer's sword was. Etianqing reached out to take the God Devourer's sword and glanced at the sword. It was also her first time seeing a famed immemorial sword. That hidden vast power caused even Etianqing to involuntarily click her tongue in admiration. Of course, the demonic nature of the God Devourer's sword also corroded Etianqing's mind. However, Etianqing's strength was much stronger than Yi Guqin's. For a short time, Etianqing did not have to worry about her mind being affected. That sword. Han Miayen obviously also noticed the God Devourer's sword. To be honest, whether it was Su Qingyu or Etianqing, Han Miayen did not care about them. As a member of the Soul Devourer clan, he could restrain Su Qingyu. Etianqing's strength had not reached the saint level, so she could not pose a threat to him. However, that pitch-black demonic sword made Han Miayen feel a great threat. It could be said that the threat of Su Qingyu and Etianqing combined was not as great as that sword. Chapter 1091. That sword, could it be? Han Miayen looked serious for the first time. As a member of the Dark World's Soul Devourer clan, he had experienced many things. For example, the primordial sword, a powerful divine weapon that once terrified the Dark World's outsiders. No, how could it be? The primordial sword is a rare divine weapon in your world. How could it appear so casually? Han Miayen couldn't believe it. Those powerful primordial swords had caused great casualties to the Dark World's outsiders. Naturally, Han Miayen was afraid of it. He simply couldn't believe it. How could such a rare divine weapon be so coincidentally encountered by him? One must know that in the entire endless world, there were only 108 such powerful divine weapons. No matter what kind of ancient existence you are, you can't avoid the fate of going to hell. Heavenly Love held the God Devourer's sword and said coldly. Her temperament suddenly changed. The God Devourer's sword emitted billowing demonic aura, causing the surrounding void to tremble. Although Heavenly Love couldn't fully utilize the power of the God Devourer's sword, he was a false saint expert after all. With the power of the primordial demon sword, his combat power immediately soared several times. He swung the sword and the dark sword light directly destroyed the void, destroying a series of space in front of him. Strong dark airflow swept in all directions. Vaguely, one could hear the roar of the primordial Taotai. Is this the power of the primordial demon sword? Yi Guqin was shocked. Just a casual swing of the sword had caused such a huge destructive power. It was terrifying. Even Hun Miayen couldn't be as calm as before. He stretched out his hand and performed a move to collide with the dark sword light. However, in the next moment, an unexpected situation occurred. The dark sword light directly cut off one of Hun Miayen's arms. No, it shouldn't be cut off. That arm was directly swallowed by the dark sword light. Damn it! Hun Miayen's face changed. His current strength was indeed very strong. However, his body was still bound by 999 chains. Hun Miayen needed to devour more experts to completely break the seal and free his body. It was because of this that Hun Miayen needed to gain control of the Sword Dynasty. With the power of the Sword Dynasty, they could swallow up the other dynasties and harvest the experts. In the end, when the seal on his physical body was removed and his primordial spirit and physical body merged, that would be when the soul-extinguishing flame was at its strongest. At that time, ordinary tribulation saints would not be his match. Originally, Hun Miayen was confident that he could suppress and devour Su Qingyu's soul before devouring Yi Tianqing and the rest. But now, he wasn't so sure. The threat that the God Devourer brought to him was too great. Is this the power of an ancient famed sword? The eyes of the sword master, Wu Hongyan, and Hua Yuntao widened as their hearts were filled with great astonishment. Although they knew that the primordial famed sword was extremely powerful, they still couldn't hide their shock when they saw it with their own eyes. Furthermore, one must know that at that moment, heaven feelings had yet to completely unleash the might of the God-devouring sword. Only the master of the God-devourer, Yi Guqin, had the ability to unleash its full power. The reason was simple. It was because the spirit of the God-devouring sword, the little fatty, had acknowledged Yi Guqin. Therefore, only Yi Guqin could fully unleash the power of the God-devouring sword. Of course, that was not now. At the very least, it would have to wait until Yi Guqin reached the Saint Realm. However, although she couldn't fully unleash the power of the God-devouring sword, Heaven Feeling's attack was still extremely powerful. No, I don't believe it. Hun Miayen activated the Great God-devouring technique again. A black hole appeared and wanted to devour Su Qingyu and Heaven Feelings. Seeing this, Heaven Feelings also activated the power of the God-devouring sword. The God-devouring sword was a famed sword made from the primordial Taotai. The Taotai had always controlled the power of devouring. Unless the ancestor of the soul-devouring clan appeared, an ordinary member of the soul-devouring clan would never be able to compare with the Taotai in terms of the way of devouring, let alone resist the power of the God-devouring sword. Heaven Feelings waved the sword again. A pitch-black devouring sword radiance spread out and destroyed the black hole. Damn it! Don't think that you can deal with me just because you have a famed primordial sword. Hun Miayen also sensed that the situation was not good. He immediately activated his ultimate move. 7 limits of devouring heaven and destroying earth, devouring forbidden limits. Hun Miayen's power exploded. Terrifying demonic aura rose and formed a terrifying heaven-devouring titanic beast in the void. It looked as though it could devour the ancient times. The 7 limits of devouring heaven and destroying earth was the terrifying martial art of the soul-devouring clan. Its power was unparalleled. With one move, the entire sacred palace collapsed. Countless fragments were swallowed by the pitch-black heaven-devouring titanic beast. If not for the great array of sky ruins sealing the entire sacred palace's inheritance, this devouring wave could definitely raise the entire mountain range of the myriad demons' nest to the ground. Its power was so strong that other than the king of demonic beasts and false saint experts, even the Sky Palace's honorables and rank 7 demonic beasts could not escape from the heaven-devouring titanic beast's devouring mouth. Facing such an ultimate move, Su Qingyu and Heaven Feelings both looked solemn. Su Qingyu had completely absorbed the power of the Soul Source Crystal. An extremely vigorous soul wave spread out. It turned into a huge palm print and pressed down on the heaven-devouring titanic beast. Heaven Feelings took out the wine gourd from her waist and took a big gulp. She then sprinkled the wine on the god-devouring sword. Heaven Feelings' aura changed again. It was as though she had turned into a wine immortal. 70% wine and 30% sword intent. Where the sword doesn't return, I ask the heavens with my sword. Heaven Feelings' sword vibrated and strengthened the god-devouring sword. A strong sword aura spread out. The entire sacred palace's inheritance was shrouded in a shocking sword intent. It's the Sword Lord's dancing sword technique. Wu Hongyan's beautiful eyes lit up. At this moment, Heaven Feelings was like the reincarnation of an ancient sword immortal. A bucket of sake and a long sword. After drinking 800 cups of sake, she swept through the 9 heavens imperial court with her sword. It was Heaven Feelings' ultimate move, dancing sword technique. Heaven Feelings swung her sword as she drank. Every sword was strengthened by the god-devouring sword's power. They slashed at the heaven-devouring titanic beast in the void. In addition, Su Qingyu attacked with all his might. The heaven-devouring titanic beast crumbled quickly. At the same time, Han Miayan's body was also pushed back. Bloody wounds started to appear on his body. Damn it, this body is too weak. Han Miayan cursed silently. Jiankui's body was too weak. It couldn't withstand the power of Han Miayan and the primordial spirit. If it was his original body, Han Miayan wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Since you've been sealed for a long time, it's time to be free. Heaven Feelings didn't delay. At this moment, his eyes were filled with demonic intent. Even with Heaven Feelings' temperament, she couldn't use the god-devouring sword for long. Damn it, I can't accept this. Han Miayan roared and attacked again. His body started to crumble again. Heaven Feelings used dancing sword technique again. Riding the sword and riding the wind, eradicating evil between heaven and earth. With wine, I'm happy. Without wine, I'm crazy. Heaven Feelings recited poems and danced. The smell of wine spread and sword intent soared. He swept his sword towards Han Miayan. His eyes were filled with determination. This sword will end your life. Chapter 1092. The dancing swordsmanship was Heavenly Sentiment's trump card, and it was extremely powerful. With the God-Devourer sword's support, the power of the sword was almost at the level of a Heavenly Tribulation Saint's attack. Moreover, Su Qingyu was assisting him from the side. There was no need to doubt his strength. The two of them attacked simultaneously, combining their moves. The terrifying fluctuations caused the space in front of them to shatter, revealing numerous pitch-black spatial cracks. 7 limits of devouring heaven and destroying earth, world-destroying limit. Soul-extinguishing flame used his ultimate move again. A terrifying black tide floated in the void, washing the world as if it wanted to devour everything in the world. If soul-extinguishing flame was in his full state, he could easily destroy a dynasty with this move. But now, with the strength of Jiankui's body, he could only use 10% or 20% of the move's power at most. Moreover, at the same time he used this move, Jiankui's body crumbled once again, almost like a cracked porcelain, fragmenting into pieces. Rumble. Su Qingyu and Heavenly Sentiment's consecutive moves collided with soul-extinguishing flame's move. An unprecedented terrifying shock wave burst out. With the point of collision as the center, space began to collapse, revealing the pitch-black spatial turbulence within. Cracks spread out in all directions. The entire land of the sacred dynasty began to shatter, and huge cracks spread like a spider web. Is this a battle between saints? Yi Guqian, who was under the protection of the Master of Swords, was not affected much. A battle between saint-level experts could indeed easily destroy the heavens and earth. Yi Guqian was looking forward to it. One day, he would also transcend mortality and become a heavenly tribulation saint. Vast waves of air rippled in all directions, and as the waves dissipated, soul-extinguishing flame state came into view. His body was completely shattered, and he could not use it anymore, and his aura began to decline. Soul-extinguishing flame's failure was due to two reasons. The first was that his body limited soul-extinguishing flame's strength. This was secondary because soul-extinguishing flame's soul attack was very powerful, and he had merged with a saint's primordial spirit. Even if his body was not strong enough, soul-extinguishing flame was confident that he could deal with Su Qingyu and heavenly sentiment. The most important reason was naturally the God Devourer sword. The primordial demon sword's power was too strong, and with the devouring power it contained, it completely restrained the Soul Devourer clan's devouring power. That was why soul-extinguishing flame was in such a sorry state. How hateful! If I did not have this ancient famed sword, I would have definitely swallowed all of you. Han Miayan's tone contained an extreme unwillingness. Fresh blood flowed out from his pair of pure black eyes. It's over. Yi Tianqing wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He had also suffered injuries. Sentiment, heavenly sentiment, heavenly sentiment, flames level, heavenly sentiments, heavenly sentiment, heavenly sentiment. But fortunately, the soul-extinguishing flame had already been completely forced to a dead end, and he didn't have the strength to turn the situation around. If I sentiment, 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 flame, heavenly extinguishing clan, extinguishing sentiment, flame, sentiment, heavenly, sentiments, extinguishing flame, extinguishing heavenly sentiment, soul extinguishing levels, extinguishing flames, extinguishing flames, soul extinguishing flame, extinguishing flame. However, even if I die, I want all of you to die with me. Soul extinguishing flame took out the compass again and seemed to be activating something. Then, the entire great array of heavenly sentiment began to rumble and tremble, as though it was going to destroy the sacred dynasty's treasure. Heavenly sentiment's eyes flashed. The God Devourer's sword in her hand vibrated, and she swung it at soul-extinguishing flame. With a puff, Jiankui's physical body exploded, and soul-extinguishing flame was completely destroyed. Hearing soul-extinguishing flame's last words, Yi Guqin frowned. Return to our clan? Does this mean that the Dark World's tribe will come to the 9 regions again? Yi Guqin muttered. However, this matter involved too many things, and Yi Guqin was not in a position to worry about it. Oh no, soul-extinguishing flame has activated the great array of heavenly sentiment, and this place will be completely destroyed soon. Confuzi's face darkened. Heavenly sentiment did not say anything, as she still had one more thing to deal with. Her gaze turned to Hua Yuntao, who was on the other side. Hua Yuntao's face was frighteningly pale at this moment. He originally thought that heavenly sentiment and the others would be killed by soul-extinguishing flame. Although he might die in the end, at least there would be a group of people who would die with him. Now, it seemed that although the great array of heavenly sentiment had been activated, heavenly sentiment and the others still had a chance to escape. However, he, Hua Yuntao, would definitely die. Deputy Alliance Master, please spare my life. I will definitely persuade the entire Hua family to submit to the Sword Dynasty and work for the Sword Alliance wholeheartedly. Hua Yuntao begged. Everyone was afraid of death, and even a false sage was no exception. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? When have I ever forced the Hua family? Heavenly Sentiment's expression was cold. What did his forgiveness get in return? In return, the Hua family became more arrogant and unscrupulous. In return, they set up a plot against him to kill him. Hua Yuntao's mouth was full of bitterness, and he was extremely regretful in his heart. However, what he regretted was not betraying the Sword Alliance, but that he should not have come personally this time. Looking at Heavenly Sentiment's cold gaze, Hua Yuntao's face darkened, and he began to threaten, Deputy Alliance Master, if you spare my life, perhaps there is still room for reconciliation between the false sage families and the rogue cultivators. If you kill this old man, then you and the 5 great clans will be irreconcilable enemies. When the time comes, the Sword Alliance will be divided, and there will be internal and external troubles. The entire dynasty may be destroyed. Seeing that begging for mercy was useless, Hua Yuntao could only start to threaten. What he said was not a lie. If the 6 false sages of the aristocratic families all died here, the 5 false sage families would definitely set off a huge civil war. If other dynasties joined in, it would definitely be a devastating blow to the Sword Dynasty. You don't have to worry about that. Seeing that Hua Yuntao did not have the slightest bit of sincere repentance, Heavenly Sentiment naturally could no longer be soft-hearted. He activated the God Devourer sword, and the blade swept across. I only hate that I didn't kill you at Mount Saint Crossing, you little bastard. At the end of his life, Hua Yuntao glared at Yi Guqin with his blood-red eyes. His gaze was as if he wanted to drink his blood and eat his flesh. It could be said that Yi Guqin had single-handedly ruined the perfect plan to kill Chu Yang. However, no matter how much he cursed, it was useless. In the end, Hua Yuntao's physical body was destroyed by the God Devourer sword, and his body exploded. At this point, the 6 false sages of the aristocratic families who came to the sacred dynasty's inheritance had all died. Yi Guqin, I'll return this sword to you. After everything was settled, Heavenly Sentiment directly returned the God Devourer sword to Yi Guqin without the slightest hesitation. Yi Guqin saw this and nodded slightly. After experiencing the great power of the primordial sword, she was still unmoved and returned it to him without hesitation. Heavenly Sentiment was indeed admirable. Next, the great formation of Sky Market will destroy this area. Let's collect the Saint Dao fruits first, said Heavenly Sentiment. In the next moment, Yi Guqin and the rest found the saint corpses. There were 7 saint corpses. Huang Qianqiu and Yi Guqin had each searched one of them. There were 5 left. After searching for a while, Heavenly Sentiment and the rest found 4 Saint Dao fruits. There was only 1 saint corpse that did not have a Saint Dao fruit. This was already considered extremely lucky. Chapter 1093. Senior Heavenly Sentiment, I wonder if you can give me the soul source crystal in the saint's corpse. Yi Guqin asked. Of course. Heavenly Sentiment nodded slightly. For Saint Dao fruits were already a great harvest for the Sword Dynasty. Although the soul source crystal was precious, it was nothing compared to the Saint Dao fruit. Heavenly Sentiment did not forget that Yi Guqin's contribution in resolving the deadlock this time could not go unnoticed. Subsequently, Yi Guqin also got his wish and obtained 5 soul source crystals. At this time, Su Qingyu had already returned to Yi Guqin. He transmitted his voice to Yi Guqin's mind. Yi Guqin, you can explore Hun Miayan's corpse to see if there are any soul source crystals. Yi Guqin was surprised. Han Miayan was from the Soul Devourer clan of the Dark World. Could there be soul source crystals in the Soul Devourer clan's body? Thinking of this, Yi Guqin also rushed to the bottom of the pyramid. Seeing Yi Guqin's action, Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and Heavenly Sentiment all looked over. They did not explore Hun Miayan's body. Because the Soul Devourer clan was different from humans, it was almost impossible for them to leave a Saint Dao fruit in their body. Even if they happened to leave a Saint Dao fruit, their laws would repel that of humans and could not be refined. Therefore, Heavenly Sentiment did not plan to explore Hun Miayan's body at all. Although Hun Miayan's physical body was bound by 999 chains, his head was still exposed. All Yi Guqin needed was the crystallization of the soul source. He bombarded Hun Miayan's head with his palm, but there was a crisp sound of metal clashing. Isn't this too hard? Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. The Soul Devourer clan was proficient in the Soul Dao, but their body was also so hard, which was beyond Yi Guqin's expectations. The bodies of the Dark World's alien races are generally stronger than humans. The body of the Soul Devouring clan is actually considered weak among the alien races in the Dark World. That's why they are so hard to kill, Su Qingyu explained through voice transmission. I see. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. The environment of the Dark World might be different from the 9 regions. Therefore, the bodies of the creatures of other races in the Dark World were generally stronger than that of humans. Let me do it. Heavenly Sentiment smiled faintly. She took out her silver-white sword and slashed at Han Miayan's body. Only then did soul-extinguishing flames' head split open. Yi Guqin immediately discovered a pitch-black crystal among them. Is this the soul-devouring clan's soul origin crystal? Yi Guqin picked up the pitch-black crystal and felt a cold, negative, dark, and powerful aura coming from it. This was completely different from the saint's soul source crystal he had obtained earlier. Of course, the ripples of this pitch-black crystal were much stronger than the soul origin crystal of a saint. Yi Guqin stored the soul source crystal of the soul extinguishing flames into his essence ring. Now was not the time to study it. Before Han Miayan died, he had completely activated the great array of sky ruins. Right now, the ground of the sacred dynasty's treasure was collapsing. It would not be long before this space was completely destroyed. Heavenly Sentiment and the others also began to attack the barrier of the great array of sky ruins. However, it was difficult to break it open in a short time. This is going to be troublesome. Heavenly Sentiment frowned. If the great array of sky ruins destroyed this space, it would be difficult to predict whether everyone, including Yi Guqin and Heavenly Sentiment, would be alive or dead. The great array of sky ruins. Yi Guqin frowned and pondered. At this moment, his eyes suddenly lit up as if he had thought of something. With a flip of his hand, he took out a key-like object from his essence ring. It was the object he had found in the great tomb under the ancient chaos wasteland from the corpse of the false saint. At that time, everyone's attention was on the incomplete map, while Yi Guqin kept the key object. Yi Guqin had never figured out the function of this key object. Now, he had some idea of its function. His figure flashed and he found the compass. Dugu, no. Yi Guqin, what are you doing? Wu Hongyan looked at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin picked up the compass and turned it over to take a look. Sure enough, there was a small keyhole at the back of the compass. I can give it a try. Yi Guqin inserted the key object into the hole at the back of the compass. Suddenly, the entire compass lit up with many formation runes again, as complicated as the orbit of the stars. Runes emerged one after another. As the compass revolved, the great array of sky ruins, which was on the verge of destruction, gradually quieted down. The entire sacred dynasty's treasure also stopped shaking. Yi Guqin, you are really surprising. Heavenly Sentiment could not help but shake her head and smile faintly as she sighed. Such a dangerous situation was easily resolved by Yi Guqin. Ha, Yi Guqin, you are really a treasure boy, but you hid it from me for so long. You are really evil. Now that the crisis was resolved, Wu Hongyan also breathed a sigh of relief and teased. Ha, of course. Yi Guqin is a disciple of my Sacred Cliff College. Confuzi was quite proud. By the way, Senior Heavenly Sentiment, I still have a Saint Dao fruit here, but I have other uses for it, Yi Guqin said. He had already obtained a Saint Dao fruit before. But this Saint Dao fruit was naturally reserved for Ling Qianhen. Confuzi and Wu Hongyan's expressions froze when they heard this. It was not that they did not want Yi Guqin to have a Saint Dao fruit. It was just that the Saint Dao fruit was useless to Yi Guqin now, but it could allow the Sword Dynasty to have another tribulation saint. Yes, no problem. You are the biggest contributor. Heavenly Sentiment said with a faint smile. Seeing that Heavenly Sentiment did not object, Confuzi and Wu Hongyan did not say anything. But they actually wanted the Sword Dynasty to have another powerhouse. Yi Guqin nodded faintly. He believed that with Ling Qianhen's temperament, if he gave the Saint Dao fruit to him, he would not hesitate. Ling Qianhen would definitely not ignore such a favor. Perhaps he would even help the Sword Dynasty. Yi Guqin actually knew this in his heart. Although the current crisis seemed to have been resolved. But the greater crisis was yet to come. 6 false saints of the aristocratic families had fallen at the same time. One could imagine what kind of shock this news would cause if it spread back to the Sword Dynasty. The 5 false saint aristocratic families would probably go to war with the rogue cultivators. When that time came, the Sword Dynasty would definitely be in chaos. The only way to solve the chaos was to have a heavenly tribulation saint. And with Leng Qianhen's aptitude, it was possible for him to break through and become a heavenly tribulation saint with the help of the Saint Dao fruit. This was Yi Guqin's real idea. Of course, Confuzi and Wu Hongyan did not know that Yi Guqin had such thoughts. In their opinion, with Leng Qianhen's stubborn and unsociable personality, it was almost impossible for the Sword Dynasty to recruit him. Well, this matter is over. We can go out now. But Hongyan, I hope you won't reveal Yi Guqin's identity. Heavenly Sentiment said. Of course. Am I that kind of blabbermouth? Wu Hongyan charmingly rolled her eyes at Heavenly Sentiment. She naturally also knew that if Yi Guqin's identity was exposed, it would attract the attention of the Heavenly God Sword Sect, Starry Sword Pavilion, Dongfang family, and other overlords. The current Sword Dynasty absolutely could not withstand the threat of the overlords. Chapter 1094. In the Thousand Demon Nest mountain range, the flames of war were temporarily extinguished. The rulers of the Thousand Demon Nest, the 10 Demon Kings, were also shocked by the sudden appearance of the Sacred Dynasty's treasure. As such, the King of Demonic Beasts and the False Saint Expert temporarily stopped their attacks and stood at two sides. The Martial Highnesses and the 7th-ranked beasts stopped their slaughter and waited for the battle to begin. There were also the geniuses of the 4 dynasties who escaped or were teleported out. All of them looked at the Sacred Dynasty's treasure with lingering fear. This trip to the Sacred Dynasty's treasure could be said to be very dangerous. Countless geniuses of the 4 dynasties had died. Only Huang Qianqiu did not have any fear on his face. He stood on the back of the purple-winged bat dragon, frowning with an indifferent expression. Huang Qianqiu was very unhappy that he could not capture Yi Guqin and obtain his secrets. He also thought that Yi Guqin would not be able to escape from Jian Kuei's evil hands, but he still had a glimmer of hope. On the other side, Mu Xingzu and the others were extremely worried. In addition, Shangguan Jingshan, Yin Zhu, and the other geniuses of the aristocratic families were looking forward to it. They vaguely knew the plan of this trip to the Sacred Dynasty's treasure. If there were no accidents, Yi Tianqing, Jian Fuzi, and the others would all die here. After that, the entire Sword Dynasty would fall into the hands of the 5 false saint aristocratic families. Humph, Dugu Wubai, so what if you are talented? In the end, you will still die. Yin Zhu and the others looked pleased. On the other side, Jian Shishan also stood in the aristocratic family's camp. He also hoped that the aristocratic family's plan would succeed. Because this was the only way he could completely obtain his freedom and live a peaceful life with her. I will definitely give you a worry-free future, even if it means that my hands will be stained with the blood of innocence. Jian Shishan murmured in his heart. Then, in this suffocating weight, the barrier that enveloped the Sacred Dynasty's treasure began to crack, and then with a bang, it shattered into light spots that filled the sky. Among the light spots, the figures of 4 people were revealed. They were Heavenly Love, Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and Yi Guqin. As the 4 figures appeared, all the experts and demonic beast kings in the entire Thousand Demon Nest mountain range turned their attention towards them. When they saw that only the 4 of them had appeared, everyone in the aristocratic family's camp, from the supremacies to the sword sons and heaven's prides of the aristocratic families, had a drastic change in expression. How is this possible? Where is the patriarch? Shangguan Jingshan's pupils shrank. This was the first time he had been so flustered. Shangguan Bo, the patriarch of the Shangguan family, had also participated in this plan. However, he did not see Shangguan Bo's figure at that moment. Where is my Yin family's first elder? Yin Zhu's expression froze. The first elder of the Yin family, Yin Lengshan, had also perished in the Sacred Dynasty's treasure. The supremacies of the aristocratic families were all shocked, unable to accept this reality. No matter how they thought about it, they couldn't understand how this perfect plan could end up like this. What's going on? Why are there only a few of them left in the Sword Dynasty? The false saint experts of the other three dynasties did not know the plan of Hua Yuntao and the others. However, they could vaguely guess the cause and effect. Previously, Hua Yuntao and the others had disappeared. It was very likely that they had been teleported to the sacred dynasty's treasure. However, now that the barrier had been lifted, only Heavenly Love and the others could be seen. Hua Yuntao and the other false saints of the aristocratic families were nowhere to be seen. The false saints of the other three dynasties were not fools. They had already guessed some things. Heavenly Love scanned the surroundings and immediately said, "The trip to the sacred dynasty's treasure is over. All members of the Sword Dynasty, leave the Thousand Demon Nest." After hearing this, the members of the Sword Dynasty's itinerant cultivators all smiled in relief. Mu Xingzu and the others breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that Yi Guqin was fine. On the other hand, the members of the aristocratic families were all ashen. Some of the supremacies of the aristocratic families secretly sent messages back to their families about what had happened here. This time, the plan of the 5 false saint aristocratic families could be said to be a complete failure. The false saints of the other 3 dynasties looked at Heavenly Love and wanted to ask if he had obtained the fruit of the saint path. However, the deterrence that Heavenly Love gave them was too strong. The false saints of the other 3 dynasties did not dare to act rashly. After thinking about it, they could only flash and enter the sacred dynasty's treasure to find out what had happened. On the other side, the 10 monster kings also turned and entered the sacred dynasty's treasure. Heavenly Love and the others began to fly into the distance. However, at this moment, a purple-winged bat dragon soared into the sky with Huang Qianqiu on its back, blocking Heavenly Love and the others' path. "Huang Qianqiu of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion, what are you doing?" Heavenly Love's tone was indifferent. The others might not have known the identity of the top genius of the sword ranking at first. However, how could they hide it from Heavenly Love? It was just that Heavenly Love did not expose him. "I just want to take him away." Huang Qianqiu pointed at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin frowned, his eyes flashing with coldness. Not only had Huang Qianqiu broken his spiritual abode, but he had also pestered him time and time again, wanting to snatch the ultimate sword domain and the ancient god's inheritance from him. This had already caused Yi Guqin to be filled with murderous intent. "I am the deputy lord of the Sword Dynasty. Dugu Wubai is a genius of the Sword Dynasty. How dare you say such words to me?" Heavenly Love's tone was indifferent. "Lord Heavenly Love, he is but a mere Dugu Wubai. If you hand him over to me, you will gain the friendship of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion. Your Sword Dynasty is currently facing internal and external troubles. If you have the help of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion, you will be as stable as a mountain." Facing a powerful false saint expert, Huang Qianqiu stood with his hands behind his back and spoke with assurance. He had the bearing of an emperor. One could not help but admire him. Huang Qianqiu was indeed worthy of being one of the 4 emperors. "Get out of my way. You are not qualified to talk to me as an equal. If not for the fact that you are a genius of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion, I would have already killed you." Heavenly Love's tone was indifferent, but it was extremely domineering. He waved one hand, and a terrifying wave of air blasted out, sending Huang Qianqiu and the purple-winged bat dragon flying. Huang Qianqiu's face immediately turned cold and ugly. With his noble status and background of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion, even some false saint experts of the top dynasties would be polite to him and not put on airs. However, Heavenly Love did not take him seriously at all. "Good, very good. Without the help of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion, let's see how your Sword Dynasty will survive in the future. And Dugu Wubai, one day, I will take all your secrets from you. You better pray that someone will always protect you." Huang Qianqiu's tone was cold. He was ambitious and did not want to be just one of the 4 emperors. He wanted to defeat Di Haoyan. Yi Guqin's ultimate sword domain and other secrets could greatly increase Huang Qianqiu's strength. This was also the reason why he was so obsessed with Yi Guqin. "Huang Qianqiu, even if you don't come looking for me in the future, I will come looking for you. Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows, his eyes cold. I, Dugu Wubai, will repay the debt of destroying my divine dwelling 100-fold. Chapter 1095. Ha! Hearing Yi Guchen's words, Huang Qianqiu chuckled. He did not take it seriously. Huang Qianqiu was not afraid of Yi Guchen even when he was at his peak. He could even suppress him. Not to mention Yi Guchen, who had his spiritual dwelling destroyed and was now a cripple. As for rebuilding his spiritual dwelling, it was not something that anyone could do. Huang Qianqiu did not think that Yi Guchen had the ability to rebuild his spiritual dwelling. If you have the chance to participate in the battlefield of prodigies, I, Huang Qianqiu, will be waiting for you there. With that, Huang Qianqiu stomped his foot. The purple-winged bat dragon roared, flapped its wings, and soared into the sky, flying into the distance. Huang Qianqiu knew that there was no point in staying here. With Yi Tianqing's protection, he could not catch Yi Guchen. However, Yi Guchen could not stay in the Sword Dynasty forever and be protected forever. Therefore, Huang Qianqiu had a chance. Moreover, after the Sword Dynasty, there would probably be a great turmoil. In the end, if the Sword Dynasty fell apart, Yi Guchen would naturally lose his protection. By then, it would be easy for Huang Qianqiu to catch Yi Guchen. After Huang Qianqiu left, Yi Tianqing and the others brought Yi Guchen and the geniuses of the rogue cultivators away from the 10,000 beast nest at their fastest speed. As for the honorables and prodigies of the aristocratic families, they did not follow. Yi Tianqing did not care about them for the time being. Because Confuzi and Wu Hongyan were severely injured, and so was Yi Tianqing. If the experts of the other three dynasties found out that the Saint Dao fruits in the sacred dynasty's treasure had been taken, they would definitely be furious. Therefore, Yi Tianqing chose to leave with the people of the Sword Dynasty as quickly as possible. As expected, not long after Yi Tianqing and the rest left the Thousand Demon Nest. The false saint experts of the three dynasties all let out a roar of unwillingness. They did not get a single Saint Dao fruit on this trip. Although there were other opportunities left in the sacred dynasty's treasure. But compared to the Sage Dao fruit, it was nothing. I can foresee the impending chaos in the Sword Dynasty. This time, Hua Yuntao and the others have all fallen in the Sword Dynasty's treasure trove. I'm afraid it won't be long before the entire Sword Dynasty falls into chaos. That's right. So what if the Sword Dynasty obtained the Saint Dao fruit? They still can't avoid falling apart. Some of the false saints from the three dynasties said with sullen faces. In addition, the Divine Condor and Blackie did not leave with Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen told them to stay in the Myriad Demon's nest for the time being. When the time was right, he would take them away. On the horizon, a ship was traveling through the void. On the ship, many of the Sword Dynasty's loose cultivators were sitting cross-legged and recuperating. In this expedition to the Sacred Dynasty's hidden treasure, from the false saints and honorables to the ordinary heaven's prides, there were many casualties. Master, you're so worried about Xingzhu. Mu Xingzhu stuck close to Yi Guchen like a swallow returning to its nest. Xuanlian, Ling Moyin, Ling Mo Shu, Kong Kong, Han Lingxian, Kenpo, Jian Jinghong, and the others also surrounded Yi Guchen. I'm fine. Looking at these familiar friends, Yi Guchen smiled faintly. This time, it's all thanks to our young friend Dugu that we were able to unravel the aristocratic family's scheme. Yi Tianqing walked over with a smile. Greetings, Vice Leader. Kenpo and the others cupped their hands and bowed. At the same time, they couldn't help but feel shocked. Hua Yuntao and the others' scheme must have targeted Yi Tianqing. What ability did Yi Guchen have to be able to unravel Hua Yuntao's scheme? Xuanlian, Ling Moyin, and the others were all surprised. Only Kenpo knew Yi Guchen's identity and knew that he might have the ability to help Yi Tianqing. Dugu Wubai, your cultivation. Yi Tianqing frowned slightly. Previously, Yi Tianqing had been in danger, so she didn't deliberately check Yi Guchen's aura. At this moment, she swept her gaze across and found that Yiguchen's condition was a little strange. I once broke through to the divine dwelling stage in the sacred dynasty's hidden treasure, but my divine dwelling was later destroyed by Huang Qianqiu, Yiguchen said casually. From his tone, it sounded as if the destruction of his divine dwelling wasn't a big deal. Master. Mu Xingzu and the others clenched their fists. So it's him. Yi Tianqing frowned slightly. To a certain extent, Yiguchen had saved Yi Tianqing's life, so Yi Tianqing naturally wouldn't ignore Yiguchen's matter. You don't have to worry about this, Alliance Master Yi Tianqing. I'll deal with Huang Qianqiu's matter myself, Yiguchen said calmly. I believe that Brother Dugu has the ability to rebuild his divine dwelling, Ling Mo Shu said firmly. When his divine dwelling was destroyed and he was dispirited, it was Yiguchen who pulled him out of the abyss. How could a person who could restore others' confidence and rebuild their divine dwelling be unable to rebuild his own divine dwelling? Therefore, Ling Mo Shu had the most confidence in Yiguchen. However, the others still had worried looks in their eyes. This was because rebuilding a divine dwelling wasn't as simple as it seemed. Most people would only become a cripple after their divine dwelling was destroyed. There might not even be 1 in 10,000 people who could bring them back from the brink of death. Don't worry, Dugu Wubai. You're the biggest contributor in this expedition to the sacred dynasty's hidden treasure, and the only one who obtained a fruit of the sacred path. Whether your divine dwelling is destroyed or not, the rules of the Battle of the Sword Sun will not change, Yi Tianqing said. As soon as he said that, Saber 9 and the rest were stunned. It seemed that no matter how strong Yiguchen was, the Jinkui position was inevitable. Alliance Master Yi Tianqing, I only need the Sword Sun position, Yiguchen said. He just wanted to use the identity of the Sword Sun to participate in the Battle of the Elites. As for the Jinkui position, he really didn't care. Dugu Wubai, you don't have to refuse. You'll be where you belong. You won't be demoted just because your divine dwelling is destroyed, Yi Tianqing said. All right then. Yiguchen smiled bitterly and shook his head. He finally understood why Yi Tianqing was so loved and respected. Not everyone had this kind of righteous heart. One could imagine how much of a sensation and discussion it would cause if someone like him, whose divine dwelling was destroyed, was promoted to the Jinkui position. Even the other dynasties would laugh at the Sword Dynasty, thinking that the Sword Dynasty had no capable people. Of course, for Yiguchen. With the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, there was almost no doubt that he could rebuild his divine dwelling. The only requirement was that he needed an opportunity to transform. As the expedition to the sacred dynasty's hidden treasure came to an end, one could imagine what kind of huge waves it would cause in the 4 great dynasties. There were a total of 10 false sacred experts from the Sword Dynasty who participated in the sacred dynasty's hidden treasure. However, when they returned, only 3 of them were left. 7 false sacred experts had fallen at once. Even a fool would know that there was a huge hidden danger in the Sword Dynasty. Moreover, the fall of 7 false sacred experts was definitely a huge blow to the Sword Dynasty. Moreover, the Sword Dynasty might have taken the Saint Dao fruit. This caused the other 3 dynasties to criticize the Sword Dynasty. Of course, in addition to this matter, there was another matter that was neither big nor small. It was bound to spread like wildfire. That was the matter of Yiguchen's divine dwelling being destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. This scene was witnessed by many elites of the 4 great dynasties. Therefore, it was impossible to hide it. Chapter 1096. While Yiguchen and the others were recuperating and returning to the Sword Dynasty. Sword Dynasty, Tiandu Ridge, where the Hua family resided. Several figures stood on top of a peak. The atmosphere was solemn and silent. The entire sky was filled with rolling dark clouds, which seemed to indicate the mood of the people present. The aura of each of these people was incomparably powerful and terrifying. They were all false saint experts. They were the leaders of the Hua family. Any one of them could make the Sword Dynasty tremble with a stomp of their feet. Among them, the leader was a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes. His face was long and narrow, and his eyes were filled with incomparable coldness. He was the head of the Hua family, Hua Tianyue, a famous false saint expert. Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai are dead. Xiao is also dead. Hua Tianyue's voice was incomparably cold. Hua Wuxiu was Hua Tianyue's biological son. This time, Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai, the two false saints of the Hua family, were leading the way to the sacred dynasty's treasure. It was supposed to be a foolproof plan, so Hua Tianyue was very assured to let Hua Wuxiu go, treating it as an experience. However, this time, they would never return. Family head, what is going on? Logically speaking, our plan was flawless. A false saint elder of the Hua family said in a deep voice. He was puzzled. According to the news from the sacred dynasty's treasure, the plan was indeed a success. However, the final result was directly reversed. The only situation that is different from the plan is that Dugu Wubai is with Yi Tianqing and the others. Hua Tianyue's face was cold and gloomy. This is just a coincidence. Even if Dugu Wubai is a natural saint, he's just a minor character now. How could he cause our plan to fail? It's even more impossible for him to cause the deaths of Hua Yuntao and Hua Yunhai. Another Hua family elder shook his head. They would never believe that Yi Guqin was the cause of the failure of this plan. I don't know about that, but I do know that the little bastard killed Xiao, so he must die. Next, inform the other aristocratic families that the plan has changed. We have to take action now. Hua Tianyue said in a deep voice. Yes. Several Hua family false saints nodded, their eyes filled with ferocity. Their original plan was to kill Yi Tianqing and the others in the sacred dynasty legacy. Then, he would naturally take over the power of the Sword Dao Alliance. Even if there were other rogue cultivators and pseudo-saints in the Sword Dao Alliance. However, without heavenly sentiment, those rogue cultivators and false saints had no leader and were nothing to worry about. Once those rogue cultivators and false saints were subdued, the entire Sword dynasty would be completely under the control of the 5 aristocratic families. But now, not only had the plan to kill Yi Tianqing failed, but the 5 aristocratic families had also lost 6 pseudo-saints. The Hua family had suffered the greatest loss. Not only had 2 pseudo-saints died, but even the strongest genius, Hua Wuxiu, had died. One could imagine how furious Hua Tianyue and the others were. As the Hua family issued the order, the other 4 aristocratic families also received the news. The Yin family, Ouyang family, and Shengguan family were all shocked and furious. After all, the death of a pseudo-saint was no small matter. On the other side, in a pavilion in the Jiang family's residence, a middle-aged man dressed like a scholar sighed deeply. He was the head of the Jiang family, Jiang Wen. As for the deputy head of the family, Jiang Wu, who had died in the sacred dynasty legacy, he was his younger brother. Jiang Wu, I've already advised you not to get involved, but you didn't listen. Now that he's dead, even if the aristocratic families can seize power in the end, it's useless to you. Jiang Wen shook his head and sighed. Among the 5 aristocratic families, the Jiang family could be considered the least ambitious family. Jiang Wen even had some friendship with the proud divine state and heavenly sentiment. Therefore, in the beginning, Jiang Wen actually didn't want the Jiang family to participate in this plan. However, Jiang Wu's strong request and the other 4 aristocratic families forced the Jiang family to participate in the plan in the name of aristocratic families. They couldn't stay out of it. Under these circumstances, Jiang Wen had no choice but to let Jiang Wu participate. But now, Jiang Wu had died. Sigh, but the silver lining is that Mian is fine. Jiang Wen sighed again. Jiang Wu's death made Jiang Wen sigh. But in the end, Jiang Wu had only himself to blame. Jiang Wen was a reasonable person and wouldn't vent his anger on heavenly sentiment and the others. The only thing that made him happy was that his son, Jiang Fengmian, was fine. That Dugu Wubai was willing to use a longevity fruit to save Mian. I owe him a favor, Jiang Wen thought to himself. Jiang Fengnian had already sent him a message to inform him of the situation, including the matter of Yi Guqin saving him. It didn't take long for the news of the Sacred Dynasty's treasure to spread in the Sword Dynasty. For a moment, the people of the Sword Dynasty were in a panic, as if a storm was coming. As expected, not long after, the 5 aristocratic families took action one after another. Hua Tianyue and the others knew that if heavenly sentiment returned to the Sword Dynasty, she would definitely not let them go. If the 5 aristocratic families were to be defeated one by one, it would be extremely disadvantageous for them. Therefore, they took action first and joined forces. At the same time, they completely exposed the connections they had built up over the years. There were a total of 360 lords at the venerable level in the 360 ridges of the Sword Dynasty. Among them, there were more than 200 lords who chose to rise up and support the aristocratic families. Among the remaining lords, there were probably only 100 or so lords who were completely loyal to the Sword Dao Alliance. There were also dozens of lords who didn't stand on any side and chose to stay out of the matter. After that, the 5 aristocratic families moved everyone in their families out of the Sword Dynasty at an extremely fast speed overnight. Together with more than 200 venerable lords, they left with the 5 aristocratic families. With the departure of these lords, the entire Sword Dynasty instantly became chaotic. If there was no lord to manage a ridge, one could imagine how chaotic it would be. What was more serious was that with the departure of the 5 aristocratic families from the Sword Dynasty, the strength of the Sword Dao Alliance almost fell by half. In the heyday of the Sword Dao Alliance, there were 40 to 50 false saint experts, which was definitely a terrifying number. But now in the entire Sword Dao Alliance, there were only a dozen false saints in the rogue cultivator camp. And the total number of false saints in the 5 aristocratic families was definitely more than 20. This kind of division was absolutely fatal to the Sword Dao Alliance. Although a dozen false saints was not a small number. But it was absolutely impossible to suppress the top dynasties such as the War God Dynasty, the Maluo Dynasty, and the domineering Saber Dynasty. In addition, when the 5 aristocratic families left the Sword Dynasty, the head of the Hua family, Hua Tianyue, had also released a message: Etian Qing has lost her mind and killed a total of 6 false saints from the 5 aristocratic families in one fell swoop. Such an action has infuriated both man and God, and punished both heaven and earth. We, the 5 aristocratic families, will never let this go. The Sword Dynasty needs a new leader. When we return, the Sword Dynasty will have a new leader. When this news spread, it also caused an uproar in the Sword Dynasty once again. The truth was always in the hands of a few people, and most people were blind. This action made the Sword Dynasty even more chaotic. Among them, there were those who believed in Etian Qing, and those who took the opportunity to smear her name. The various forces clashed with each other, causing bloody casualties. For a time, the Sword Dynasty, which was known as the country of sword cultivators and the head of the 100 great dynasties, was in a precarious situation. Chapter 1097. Damn it, how could they do this? Are they trying to drag the Sword Dynasty into the abyss? A huge ship was traveling through the void. Yi Guqin and the others were sitting cross-legged on the ship. In a few days, they would return to the Sword Dynasty. But they already knew some things about the Sword Dynasty. The one who spoke was Kenpo. He was born in the Sword Dynasty, grew up in the Sword Dynasty, and grew up in the Sword Alliance. He had great feelings for the Sword Dynasty and the Sword Alliance. Naturally, he didn't want to see the Sword Dynasty become like this. It's useless to be anxious now. The 5 fake saint families obviously have a backup plan. I'm afraid the Sword Dynasty's biggest problem is the following situation, Yi Guqin said. And that Jian Shi-san, we treated him as a brother, but in the end, thinking of Jian Shi-san, Kenpo clenched his fists, his chest heaving up and down. He still couldn't let go of Jian Shi-san's betrayal. Jian Shi still trusted Jian Shi-san until his death. I have some ideas about Jian Shursan, but I'll have to wait until we return to the Sword Dynasty to be sure. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with a dark light. He had learned before that Jian Shursan was a person who had been separated for a long time. Logically speaking, there was no way he would betray the aristocratic families. There must be some hidden reason behind this. But Yi Guqin would have to wait until they returned to the Sword Dynasty to find out the answer. After that, Yi Tianqing and the others returned to the Sword Dynasty as fast as they could. According to past practice, after the Sword Sun battle, the Sword Sun conferment ceremony would be held a few days later to announce the next Sword Sun candidate. But with the Sword Dynasty's current situation, it was obviously impossible to hold the ceremony immediately. After returning to the Sword Dynasty, Yi Guqin and the others handed over some of the treasures they found in the Holy Dynasty's treasure trove for evaluation. Yi Guqin also handed over 2 longevity fruits. Of course, those 5 soul origin crystals and the soul-devouring clan's soul annihilation flame were naturally taken by Yi Guqin himself. As for the sage Dao fruit, he had also obtained Yi Tianqing's permission to keep it. However, that sage Dao fruit would also be counted in his grade. Strictly speaking, Yi Guqin had contributed greatly to the 4 Saint Dao fruits that Heaven Sentiment had obtained. If it weren't for Yi Guqin's help, they wouldn't even be able to survive, let alone obtain the sage Dao fruit. Therefore, there was actually no suspense about the first place in this Sword Sun battle. After the betrayal of the 5 aristocratic families, the Sword Sons and heavenly prides of the aristocratic families who participated in the Sword Sun battle were obviously completely disqualified. Therefore, the next 13 Sword Sons would only be selected from Sacred Cliff College, Tianxian College, Jian Jinghong, and the Lone Cultivator Sword Sun. As for the other 3 academies that were controlled by the aristocratic families, the heavenly prides of the aristocratic families would not be able to obtain the position of Sword Sun. After returning to the Sword Dynasty, Yi Tianqing, Confuzi, Wu Hongyan, and the others rushed to the Sword Monarch Ridge without stopping. The Sword Monarch Ridge was the center of the entire Sword Dynasty, where the Sword Dao Alliance was located. The location of the 5 Academies tournament that was previously held by the 5 major academies was the Sword Monarch City of the Sword Monarch Ridge. After returning to the Sword Monarch City, Yi Tianqing immediately began to command the Sword Dao Alliance to suppress the chaos in the Sword Dynasty. With the return of Yi Tianqing, the stabilizing force, the entire Sword Dao Alliance began to operate again. More than 10 lone cultivator false saints were sent to various chaotic areas by Yi Tianqing to suppress the chaos. As for where the 5 aristocratic families were located, it was already empty. Yi Tianqing did not have the energy to divert her attention to track down the 5 aristocratic families. However, she believed that the 5 aristocratic families would definitely make a comeback and think of ways to seize control of the Sword Dynasty. Yi Guqin did not head to the Sword Monarch Ridge. Instead, he returned to Sacred Cliff College. Jian Jinghong, Kenpo, Mu Xingzu, and the others also stayed in Sacred Cliff College. Many disciples in Sacred Cliff College also knew that Yi Guqin's spiritual abode had been destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. However, no one looked down on or mocked Yi Guqin because of this. This was because Yi Guqin had long been the faith and hope of all the disciples in Sacred Cliff College. From the start of the 5 Academies tournament until now. After the 3 Heavenly Gates tournament, his reputation was first revealed. After bravely passing the 20th level of Mount Saint Crossing, he established himself as a natural saint. After the trip to the Sword Catacomb, he broke through 10,000 feet. After the 5 Academies tournament, he swept away all the heroes and dominated the world with his sword. After Gu Jianmu broke the records of his predecessors, his talent was unparalleled. Along the way, when had Yi Guqin not shocked the world and created miracles? Therefore, many disciples in Sacred Cliff College hoped that Yi Guqin could rebuild his spiritual abode and reach the top of the heavenly legends again. Of course, this was only what the Sacred Cliff College disciples thought. The other heavenly legends of the Sword Dynasty, and even the heavenly legends of the other dynasties, either looked on coldly or mocked Yi Guqin's spiritual abode being destroyed. It was not easy to reach the top. After reaching the top and falling into the abyss, it was even more difficult to climb back up again. However, Yiguchin himself was not affected by the outside world. To Yiguchin, rebuilding his spiritual abode was almost a certainty. He just needed some luck. Yiguchin wasn't in a hurry either. He spent a few days recuperating from his injuries. My body is fine, but to rebuild my spiritual abode, I need luck, Yiguchin muttered to himself in the cave dwelling. After reaching the divine dwelling stage, Yiguchin needed to pass through the 4 tribulations of earth, water, fire and wind. Each tribulation corresponded to a kind of power, and was also a kind of transformation. If he could endure the 4 transformations, then the spiritual abode that Yiguchin cultivated would be unprecedentedly powerful. But to rebuild and transform the spiritual abode, he needed to find a secret realm of the corresponding attribute. For example, the earth tribulation needed to find a place where the earth dragon veins gathered. Or a place where the earth chi was rich, and after enduring endless tempering, the spiritual abode could be rebuilt and transformed. But how could such a rare secret realm be so easy to find? I heard that there is a great formation in the skyless sword domain that relies on the power of the earth veins to operate. It is extremely powerful, and even poses a great threat to false saint experts. I wonder if it is a secret realm of opportunity. Yiguchin pondered. The skyless sword domain was the most mysterious and dangerous of the 4 great secret realms of the Sword Dynasty. Even the Alliance Master, the proud divine continent, was trapped in it and unable to escape. It was clear how dangerous and difficult it was. Although the skyless sword domain is very dangerous, I still have to explore it later. Moreover, this secret realm is related to the 7th generation sword master, Nameless. As a sword master, I should be able to find something. Yiguchin decided in his heart that he would definitely make a trip to Heavenless Sword Realm. Moreover, Heavenly Sentiment had also asked him to go to Heavenless Sword Realm to explore and see if he could find traces of the proud divine continent. But at present, the chaos in the Sword Dynasty had not yet subsided, and Yi Tianqing obviously did not have the time. Yiguchin could only wait for a while. Right, there is also the matter of Jian Shisan. Yiguchin suddenly thought. He also remembered that Jian Shisan seemed to be under the control of Hua Wuxiu in the Sacred Dynasty's treasure trove. Could it be, the root is the Hua family? Thinking of this, Yiguchin directly stood up and called Jian Jinghong, Kenpo, Jian Wu, and Sword 7. They set off and rushed to the Hua family's residence in Tiandu Ridge. Chapter 1098. Tiandu Ridge, the Hua family's residence. After the Hua family left the Sword Dynasty, the entire Hua family's residence became empty. There were also many people who came to the Hua family's residence to search, hoping to pick up some scraps. However, when the Hua family left, they packed up everything and didn't leave behind any resources or valuable items. Thus, it didn't take long for the Hua family's residence to become empty and desolate, with no one coming to visit. However, at this moment, there was the sound of rushing wind. A figure rushed into the Hua family's residence with hurried steps. He wore a dusty gray robe and a child's toy like a ghost mask on his face. It was Jian Shisan, who had returned to the Sword Dynasty. After Jian Shisan killed Sword 10 and Jian Shi, he naturally couldn't follow Yi Tianqing. However, he also didn't follow the sword sons and prodigies of the aristocratic families. Instead, he returned to the Sword Dynasty alone. Looking at the empty and desolate Hua family's residence, Jian Shisan felt an inexplicable sense of panic. It was hard to imagine that the usually aloof and indifferent Jian Shisan would feel this way. "Where are you? Where are you? Please don't let anything happen to you," Jian Shisan murmured as he searched around the Hua family's residence. Finally, Jian Shisan stood in front of a dusty attic. This was the last place he hadn't explored. Jian Shisan entered the attic to search. He quickly discovered a mechanism on the wall. After turning on the mechanism, a bottomless tunnel appeared. Jian Shisan took a deep breath, feeling that his breathing was a bit chaotic. He forcefully suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and went deeper into the tunnel. Finally, an underground secret room appeared before his eyes. At the same time, a little girl appeared before his eyes. When he saw the little girl, Jian Shisan's heart twitched violently as if it was being clenched tightly by someone. Because the little girl had collapsed on the ground. She lay in a pool of blood, like a butterfly sealed in blood-red amber. Beautiful, innocent, but cold. No, why? Jian Shisan's entire body began to tremble. Step by step, he walked towards the girl. Every step was as heavy as 10,000 caddies. Little sister. Big brother is back, I'm back, to see you. Jian Shisan's hoarse voice trembled as he slowly walked up to the girl and picked up her blood-stained body. The girl was petite and cold. She had already stopped breathing. A flower of blood bloomed in her heart. Jian Shisan instantly understood. His younger sister, the little girl, had a miniature array formation placed in her heart. Hua Wuxiu was the one who controlled the array formation. Before Hua Wuxiu died in the Sacred Dynasty's treasure trove, he secretly activated the array formation. At the same time that he perished, Sword 13's sister perished as well. Why? Jian Shisan roared to the sky, tears falling uncontrollably. The grimace mask on his face also fell at the same time. This toy-like grimace mask was personally made for him by his younger sister. Under the mask, Jian Shisan's ordinary face was revealed. His teary eyes were scarlet and filled with despair. He endured loneliness and worked undercover for so many years. In exchange, he only received a cold corpse. Little sister, big brother promised you that he would give you a carefree future. For this, it doesn't matter even if my hands are stained with the blood of innocent people and become a shameful traitor. But, why? Jian Shisan felt as if thousands of ants were gnawing at his heart. Why did the heavens always tease him like this? At the same time. Outside the Hua family's residence, several figures flashed out. It was Yi Guqin and the others who had rushed to Tiandu Ridge. This is the Hua family's residence, but it's already empty. Jian Jinghong said. Will Jian Shisan really come back? If I really meet him, I will definitely kill him with my own hands to avenge Jian Shi and the others. Kenpo could not hide the murderous intent in his tone. To be able to make a calm person like Kenpo reveal such murderous intent. It was obvious how angry he was in his heart. Indeed, in fact, we all know how much Jian Shi loves Jian Shisan. When faced with Jian Shi, he actually did it. He is simply a beast. Jian Wu and Seventh Swordsman both said in a cold tone. Alright, let's not talk about it first. Let's go in and explore first. Yi Guqin waved his hand. He felt that Jian Shisan might really have some secrets. He remembered the banquet held at Sacred Cliff College. Only Jian Shisan sat alone on the rock wall drinking alone, looking desolate and lonely. It was hard for Yi Guqin to believe that such a person was an unpardonable evil person. After that, Yi Guqin and the others also entered the Hua family's residence. Not long after, they heard a noise coming from one of the pavilions. Yi Guqin and the others landed outside the pavilion and stared inside. The sound of footsteps could be heard. Everyone was on high alert. A figure slowly walked out. Jian Shisan was dressed in a gray robe. His face was blank as if he had lost his soul. Jian Shisan, you're really here. When they saw the person walking out of the pavilion, Kenpo and the others could not suppress their murderous intent. Wait! Yi Guqin suddenly waved his hand. At this time, everyone noticed that Jian Shisan was holding the body of a little girl in one hand. In the other hand, he was holding the grimace mask. He raised his dull eyes and glanced at Yi Guqin and the others. His eyes were like a pool of stagnant water, without the slightest fluctuation. The atmosphere was silent for a moment. After a long time, Jian Shisan said in a hoarse voice, "If you want to kill me, then do it. I just want to know why." Kenpo gritted his teeth and said coldly, Ha, it doesn't matter. Jian Shisan smiled sadly. Then, Ye Guqin and the others finally heard Jian Shisan's story. Jian Shisan's parents died when they were very young. Only the brother and sister relied on each other for survival. However, the two of them lived a life of hunger and cold. However, Jian Shisan had an extraordinary talent in swordsmanship. He had used this to protect his sister many times. Perhaps because he was used to killing since he was young, Jian Shisan learned the lifeless swordsmanship, which was more inclined towards killing. However, there was one time when the siblings were in mortal danger. In the end, the Hua family stepped in and saved him and his sister. Since then, his sister had been staying in the Hua family. The members of the Hua clan, on the other hand, assigned Sword 13 to join the sect of a wandering cultivator expert and become a spy for the Hua clan. Moreover, the Hua family promised that one day, when the Hua family took control of the Sword dynasty, they would set him and his sister free. After that, Jian Shisan secretly investigated and found that the Hua family was the one who caused that mortal danger. However, Jian Shisan had no choice at that time. His sister was under house arrest in the Hua family. Even he couldn't see her. Helpless, Jian Shisan could only work hard to complete his undercover mission. In order to avoid unnecessary feelings, Jian Shisan was a loner. He never got close to Kenpo, Jian Shi, and the others. However, even Jian Shisan didn't expect this. The heavens were playing tricks on him. In the end, he ended up like this. He killed Jian Shi, who loved him, with his own hands. His sister still couldn't escape the evil hands of the Hua family. Nothing could be more tragic than this. Chapter 1099. After listening to Jian Shisan's story, Ye Guqin and the others were silent. Kenpo and the others' killing intent silently dissipated. What else could they say? If they were in Jian Shisan's shoes, they could only passively accept their tragic fate. Why didn't you tell us all this? Kenpo clenched his teeth, not knowing whether it was hatred or sorrow in his heart. What's the use of telling you? If the news leaked, my sister would be executed immediately. Jian Shisan smiled bitterly. Ye Guqin sighed deeply, looked at Jian Shisan, and said, Jian Shisan, turn back. You still have a chance to make up for it. You can still be the Sword's son, and help the Sword dynasty deal with the Hua family. Jian Shisan shook his head, his body was like a piece of wood, and his heart was like dead ashes. It doesn't matter. I can't even protect my family. What's the use of being the Sword's son? What's the use of the sword in my hand? What's the use of taking my life? Jian Shisan looked up at the sky and smiled bitterly, blood dripping from the corner of his eyes. It was unknown whether it was blood or tears. Seeing that Jian Shisan's condition was not right, Ye Guqin frowned, and hurriedly rushed out. Dugu Wubai, this life is what I owe Jian Shi. I'm returning it to her now. I only hope that after I die, I can be buried with my sister. Because when she was young, she was very afraid of the cold, very afraid of loneliness. In Jian Shisan's hand, the blood-red bloodbath sword flashed. The sword tip reversed, and pierced through his own chest and heart. Warm blood spurted out. Jian Shisan, Kenpo, Jian Jinghong, and the others' faces all changed. Puchi, Jian Shisan's body fell to the ground, still holding his sister. Little sister, the Yellow Springs is too cold, big brother will accompany you, don't be afraid. Jian Shisan's lips curled into a smile. He said the last words of his life and stopped breathing. The atmosphere was terrifyingly silent. Damn it. Kenpo's breathing became chaotic. This was the first time he had lost his composure like this. Hua family, I, Jian Jinghong, will witness your destruction with my own eyes. Jian Jinghong clenched his fists tightly as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. If it weren't for the Hua family, Jian Shisan's tragedy wouldn't have happened. In the end, the main culprits were the 5 pseudo-saint aristocratic families. Sigh. Yi Guqin let out a long sigh. As the soul of the sword demon, he was already used to the vicissitudes of life. However, at this moment, he couldn't help but sigh. To put it bluntly, it was all about strength. If Jian Shisan had absolute strength, he might have been able to avoid this tragedy. Just like Yi Guqin, if he had great strength, he wouldn't have watched Su Jianshi being sealed in the Emperor's sword and taken away by Di Haotian in the Tianhuang Plains. I still need strength. When I go back this time, I'll start refining my doppelganger. Yi Guqin was even more determined to become stronger. Whether it was refining his doppelganger or rebuilding his divine abode, they were all means to become stronger. After that, Yi Guqin and the others buried Jian Shisan and his sister in a peach blossom forest and erected a nameless tombstone. Yi Guqin held the ghost mask in his hand. He also finally understood why Sword 13 was wearing this devilish mask that looked like a child's toy on his face. It was because his sister gave it to him. Jian Shisan, I will definitely use this ghost mask to witness the destruction of the Hua family. Yi Guqin murmured as he put the ghost mask into his origin ring. After sighing with emotion, everyone left. Kenpo and the others were going back to the Sword Monarch Ridge to report this matter to the Sword Dao Alliance. Yi Guqin was alone and separated from them. Because he still had one thing to do. That was to give the fruit of saintly way to Ling Qianhen. Yi Guqin could foresee that the 5 pseudo-saint families wouldn't let this matter rest. The next test was the Sword Dynasty's greatest calamity. If he could rope in an expert like Ling Qianhen, it would be very helpful for the Sword Dynasty's future. Ling Qianhen had been cultivating in the Sword Tomb. Yi Guqin didn't stop and rushed to the Sword Tomb's location, the Heavenly Sword Mountain. A few days later, Yi Guqin arrived at the Sword Tomb of the Sky Sword Mountain. The chaos in the Sword Dynasty hadn't been completely quelled yet. Therefore, the Sword Tomb, which used to be incomparably crowded, was now sparsely populated. Yi Guqin's figure flashed as he stepped directly into the Sword Tomb. Now, the sword chi pressure in the Sword Tomb was no longer a threat to Yi Guqin. He had the creation-level sword will of all creation, so this kind of sword pressure was useless against him. Soon, Yi Guqin arrived at Ling Qianhen's cultivation place. The surroundings were covered in silver, and the sky was filled with frost and snow. Come in. Before Yi Guqin stepped in, Ling Qianhen's voice sounded in his ears. Ling Qianhen must have sensed Yi Guqin's arrival. Yi Guqin's figure flashed in and immediately saw Ling Qianhen. Ling Qianhen was sitting cross-legged on a hill. His long gray hair was like frost and snow. There were 2 crisscrossing scars on his face, and his eyes were like cold stars in the sky. His temperament, as usual, was proud and cold, like a lone wolf in the snow. Senior Ling Qianhen. Yi Guqin cupped his hands slightly. Yi Guqin, you're here. I've heard about what happened in the nest of 10,000 demons. You're really lucky, Ling Qianhen said lightly. In the expedition to the Sacred Dynasty's hidden treasure, many geniuses had died, some venerables had also died, and even a few false saints had died. Yi Guqin was indeed lucky to be able to come back alive. I was just lucky, Yi Guqin said with a faint smile. Well, what are you here for this time? Didn't I give you the communication jade slip? Ling Qianhen asked. He didn't expect that Yi Guqin would come to give him the fruit of the Sage Dao. Senior, have you forgotten our agreement? I'm here to fulfill it, Yi Guqin said. Agreement, could it be? Ling Qianhen's eyes first flashed with a wisp of doubt, and then there was a sudden shock in his eyes. Given Ling Qianhen's character, to be able to make him show surprise, it showed how shocked his heart was. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you, Yi Guqin flipped his wrist, and a fruit imprinted with the aura of the Sage Dao appeared in his hand. As soon as the fruit appeared, Feng Qiu's eyes lit up. There seemed to be sacred runes of the law looming in the surrounding void. Ling Qianhen's breath was slightly disturbed, and snow fluttered all over the sky, indicating that his heart was not calm. Is this the fruit of the Sage Dao? Ling Qianhen stared at the fruit. That's right. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. Ling Qianhen exhaled softly. He didn't suspect that Yi Guqin was lying, nor did he suspect the fruit of the sage Tao. Because Ling Qianhen himself was an extremely strong false saint. Although his comprehension of the law was not very deep, it was definitely not shallow. He could feel that the power of law contained in the fruit of the sage Tao was indeed the essence left behind by a sage. Ling Qianhen took a deep breath, suppressed the shock in his heart, and stared at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin, do you know the value of this fruit of the sage Tao? Of course I do. The fruit of the sage Tao is almost priceless, especially for a false saint expert, Yi Guqin said truthfully. Then are you still willing to give it to me? Ling Qianhen asked. Although a fruit of the sage Tao is priceless, it can't compare to a promise from me. I will do what I say, and I will not go back on my word. Yi Guqin's words were sonorous and resolute. Chapter 1100. Hearing Yi Guqin's resolute words. Even Ling Qianhen stared straight at Yi Guqin with a strange light in his eyes. Yi Guqin was indeed different from anyone he had met before. Ling Qianhen was proud and aloof. He never lived in groups, like a lone wolf. He believed that most people in this world were vulgar and boring. Therefore, he refused to communicate with others and focused on pursuing his own martial arts and sword Tao. However, Yi Guqin was very compatible with Ling Qianhen's temperament. That kind of feeling was like the appreciation between heroes. Although Yi Guqin's strength was not on the same level as his, this feeling was very strong. Ling Qianhen naturally did not know that Yi Guqin's young body hid a heart full of vicissitudes. The former sword demon Dugu Wubai also lived in groups. He lived alone on a peak with only a divine eagle as his companion. To some extent, the former Dugu Wubai and Ling Qianhen were the same kind of people. They were the kind of experts who looked indifferent on the outside but were proud swordsmen on the inside. Therefore, Ling Qianhen had this feeling of appreciation. And now, Yi Guqin freely gave away the fruit of the holy way just to fulfill a promise he once made. This made Ling Qianhen feel a trace of admiration from the bottom of his heart. Ha, Yi Guqin, you are very interesting. You are different from others. You are not a vulgar mortal. Ling Qianhen smiled. Ling Qianhen had not smiled like this for a long time. It is my honor to be able to make Senior Leng look at me differently. Yi Guqin smiled faintly. There's no need to call me Senior Leng. If you don't mind, just call me Brother Leng. I won't hesitate to accept this Saint Tao fruit. Ling Qianhen didn't like to beat around the bush and directly took the holy Tao fruit. Yi Guqin smiled calmly. He did not feel the slightest reluctance to part with the sacred Tao fruit. Not to mention that Yi Guqin had no use for the sage Tao fruit right now. On the 20th level of Mount Saint Crossing, he had received the baptism of Saint Tao laws. In terms of value, it was far from what a single Saint Tao fruit could compare to. Therefore, the sage Tao fruit was of little value to Yi Guqin. It would be better to give it to Ling Qianhen as a favor and fulfill his promise. Yi Guqin, regardless of whether I can transcend mortality and become a saint in the end, I will never forget your kindness. Just send me a message when you need me, said Ling Qianhen. Yi Guqin was a man of his word. Ling Qianhen would naturally return the favor. Although he had a cold personality, he was extremely grateful. This could be seen from the Tianhuang Plains. Even in the face of an overlord-level force, Ling Qianhen did not shrink back and was still willing to return Duan Tianfeng's favor. Thank you, Brother Leng. Yi Guqin cupped his hands and smiled. Ling Qianhen's promise before was because of Duan Tianfeng's face. But now, Ling Qianhen really owed Yi Guqin a favor. One could imagine that if there was any turmoil in the Sword Dynasty in the future, as long as Yi Guqin needed it, Ling Qianhen would not hesitate even in the face of an overlord-level force. Well, Yi Guqin, I need to go into seclusion for a while. If it goes well, the next time you see me, I might be different from now. Ling Qianhen was in a good mood and smiled faintly. Then I wish Brother Len can transcend mortality and become a saint. I won't disturb you any further. Yi Guchen replied. Then, Yi Guchen left the sword tomb. Ling Qianhen also left the sword tomb and went to a secluded place to prepare for his tribulation. With this matter over, Yi Guchen only had one more important thing left. Refining a clone. To Yi Guchen, refining a clone was the most important thing. It was related to whether he could control the power of the God Devourer sword. As for the power of the God Devourer sword, Yi Tianqing had already proven it in the Sacred Dynasty's inheritance. So Yi Guchen was looking forward to refining a clone. Now, if Yi Guchen wanted to become stronger, there were only two ways. One was to transform his spiritual abode, and the other was to refine a clone. To transform his spiritual abode, he had to at least wait until he entered the Heavenless Sword realm and see if there were any opportunities. As for refining a clone, everything was ready and the materials were all ready. Then, Yi Guchen left the Heavenly Sword Mountain and rushed back to Sacred Cliff College. After returning to Sacred Cliff College, Yi Guchen directly asked Bei Xian Elder to prepare a secret room with a sealing array for him. Yi Guchen did not want to expose his clone to the world too early. Because this clone was related to the God Devourer sword and was very important. It was best not to reveal it. So Yi Guchen did not tell anyone about refining a clone. He did not even tell his closest friends, Mu Xingzu and the others. In the secret room, Yi Guchen sat cross-legged on the ground. Beside him, Su Qingyu's essence spirit appeared. Senior Su, can we begin? Asked Yi Guchen. Although it was extremely important to refine the doppelganger, Yi Guchen remained calm and steady. To be honest, I can't guarantee a 100% success rate in refining a clone. Also, in order to let the clone be of one mind with you, you have to split a portion of your spiritual C's power. If it were an ordinary person, the success rate of refining a clone would be greatly reduced if their spiritual C's power is insufficient. But you're different. Your special spiritual C is amazing. There shouldn't be too much of a problem. Su Qingyu said that he could not guarantee a 100% success rate. But from his tone, it was clear that he was very confident in Yi Guchen. That's good. The 3-year deadline to save Su Jianshi is almost over. I don't have time to delay, said Yi Guchen firmly. Within 3 years, Yi Guchen had to have the power to defeat Di Haotian. But now, Yi Guchen could not deal with Huang Qianqiu, who was slightly weaker than Di Haotian. Therefore, he was a little anxious. And this clone might be the key to defeating Di Haotian. Alright. Since you said so, I'll help you succeed no matter what price I have to pay. Hearing Yi Guchen's words, Su Qingyu's eyes were filled with gratification. Then, Yi Guchen took out the God Devourer sword in his dantian. The sword guard of the God Devourer sword was shaped like an open beast's mouth. A chaotic whirlpool spun inside like a black hole. There was a chaotic space hidden in it. It was rumored that the primordial Taotia's body was a chaotic void. There were two things in the chaotic space. One was a cloud of connate purple qi. It was Zi Donglai's special ability. It was absorbed into the God Devourer sword and was preserved. Connate purple qi was known as a cultivation accelerator. It could greatly increase the cultivation speed of talents. The other thing was half a pure demon body. This pure demon body was refined by the Demon Sword Emperor, Jitian, using the devouring power of the God Devourer sword. This body was originally given to him by Jitian to use. But in the end, he only got half of it. The other half was given to Yi Guchen. And this clone refined from half a pure demon body could perfectly control the God Devourer's sword without being eroded by the sword's demonic intent. Chapter 1101. After taking out half of the pure demon body and the connate purple qi, Yi Guchen took out the 3 treasures needed to refine the clone. There was a jade bottle containing an elixir. It was the bone-molding elixir. In addition, there was an emerald green crystal that looked like a heart. It exuded an extremely rich life essence. It was the longevity wood core. Finally, there were 6 soul source crystals. 5 of them were translucent crystals the size of pigeon eggs. They were saint crystals. There was another crystal the size of a fist. It was completely black and exuded a powerful, ominous, and cold aura. It was the soul source crystal of Hun Miayen, an elite of the Soul Devourer clan from the Dark World. Seeing the 6 soul source crystals, Yi Guchen hesitated slightly and asked Su Qingyu, "Senior Su, do I need to use all 6 of them?" Su Qingyu replied, "Actually, under normal circumstances, 1 saint crystal would be enough. But in your case, I'm afraid 1 is not enough. But I want to tell you that you have to be careful with the soul source crystal of the Soul Devourer clan." "Senior Su, what do you mean?" Yi Guchen looked surprised. "After all, I don't know much about the Soul Devourer clan. As an alien race from the Dark World, and one that is proficient in the Tao of Souls, Hun Miayan's soul source crystal must be more powerful than these 5 saint crystals. But at the same time, no one has ever used the soul source crystal of the Soul Devourer clan to refine a clone. So if you use the soul source crystal of the Soul Devourer clan, there are only 3 possibilities. First, the sea of consciousness created will be unstable and collapse, and the refining of the clone will fail. Second, the Soul Devourer clan is an alien race from the Dark World. Using the soul source crystal may affect the consciousness of the clone and cause it to fall into chaos and madness." Su Qingyu paused for a moment as he spoke. Yi Guchen frowned slightly. Now that he heard it, using the soul source crystal of the Soul Devourer clan would do him no good. He asked again, "What about the 3rd possibility?" Finally, Su Qingyu frowned slightly and said, "The soul source crystal of the Soul Devourer clan perfectly fused with the clone. In that case, it will create a clone with the talent of the Soul Devourer clan." "Talent of the Soul Devourer clan?" Hearing this, Yi Guchen was shocked. Yi Guchen had already witnessed the power of the Soul Devouring clan. It could be said that without the help of the God Devourer sword, Su Qingyu and Heavenly Sentiment would not be able to deal with Hun Miayen. There were also the terrifying divine abilities of the Soul Devouring clan, the 7 limits of devouring heaven and destroying earth, and so on. All of these showed how powerful the Soul Devouring clan was. But I want to tell you that the Soul Devouring clan is an alien race in the Dark World. Everyone has the right to kill them. Even if they succeed in the end, there may be hidden dangers in the future, Su Qingyu warned. Yi Guchen understood the meaning of Su Qingyu's words. Even if the avatar had successfully fused with the soul-extinguishing flame's soul source crystal in the end, this meant that the clone possessed the power of the Soul Devouring clan. The Soul Devouring clan was a foreign race from the Dark World. To the 9 regions, they were enemies. Therefore, it was inevitable that they would be targeted. However, Yi Guchen did not care about any of this. The history of the foreign races in the Dark World could be traced back to the era of the 100 races. After such a long time, other than those old antiques, almost no one knew about the Dark World's foreign races. It was even more impossible to recognize the power of the Soul Devouring clan. Therefore, there was no need to worry about this at the moment. Thinking of this, Yi Guchen's eyes flickered, and he said, "Senior Su, I've decided to use the Soul Devouring clan's soul origin crystal." "Are you sure?" Su Qingyu asked. "I'm sure. My clone, Yi Guchen, must possess a powerful innate talent and power that can defeat those of the same generation. And if you want to obtain any power, you naturally have to pay the same risk and price. I'd rather fail than be mediocre." Yi Guchen's tone was resolute. "What a good, I'd rather fail than be mediocre. Yi Guchen, I didn't misjudge you," Su Qingyu said with a smile. Yi Guchen's timidity, worrying about this and that, made Su Qingyu feel a little disappointed. After making the decision, the process of refining the clone finally began. "Yi Guchen, first of all, use the special fire of heaven and earth to refine this half of the pure demon body and transform it into a complete body," Su Qingyu instructed. Yi Guchen nodded slightly, and in the blink of an eye, the pitch-black demonic heart flame rose. The pitch-black flame enveloped half of the pure demon body. Sizzling sounds of burning could be heard. At the same time, Su Qingyu also took action. A wave of soul power spread out and began to transform the entire body. Su Qingyu formed a series of runes and inserted them into the body. This was a method of refining the body that he had once obtained in a secret realm. After a few days, the original half of the body had been completely refined into a complete body. The body was slender and well-proportioned. There were no bulging muscles, but one could feel the monstrous power contained in the body. On the surface of the skin, there were some faint black demonic patterns that appeared from time to time, giving the entire body a mysterious and domineering demonic nature. I once obtained an extraordinary method of refining the body in a secret realm, but it had a very strong demonic nature, so I have never used it. Now, it finally has a place to use it, Su Qingyu said. Oh, I see. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. In the eyes of Su Qingyu, a heavenly tribulation saint, it could be called an extraordinary method of refining the body. Obviously, it was not an ordinary thing. That method of refining the body is called the battle god demonic body. It requires demonic chi to cultivate. This pure demon body happens to meet the requirements. After refining, it should be able to reach the first revolution of the battle god demonic body, Su Qingyu said. According to Su Qingyu's explanation, the battle god demonic body was divided into 9 revolutions. With each revolution, the body's strength would skyrocket. Moreover, it could rely on demonic chi and devour other people's blood and essence to cultivate. Although the demonic nature was very strong, its power was also extremely shocking. If cultivated to the extreme, it would have the power to reach the 9th revolution of the battle god demonic body and destroy the world. That's the best. My main body will cultivate the ancient god's tactics, and my doppelganger will cultivate the battle god demonic body. The two will not interfere with each other. Yi Guqin nodded and said. Although the ancient god's tactics was powerful, it was enough as long as the main body cultivated it. The main body and doppelganger cultivated different methods of refining the body. When the time came, the main body and doppelganger would merge together and superimpose the ancient god's tactics and the battle god demonic body. By then, how terrifying would Yi Guqin's body be? Even Yi Guqin could not imagine it. After refining the body, Su Qingyu took out the bone-molding saint pill again and put it into the doppelganger's mouth. Yi Guqin immediately saw that the body that had been refined was beginning to solidify and swell. Under the skin, bones spread out to support the body. Then, Su Qingyu stretched out his hand again and cut open the doppelganger's right chest with one hand. Then, he put the longevity wood core that looked like a heart and looked like an emerald into the doppelganger's body. If your doppelganger is refined successfully, it still needs the life essence of the longevity wood core to support it in the early stages. When it fully matures later, it will give birth to its own heart, Su Qingyu said. Yi Guqin nodded and then asked, but Senior Su, isn't the heart on the left? Su Qingyu smiled and said, you know it's on the left. If you pierce through the enemy's left chest during a fight, will you immediately think that the enemy is dead and let down your guard? I understand. Yi Guqin's eyes lit up. Su Qingyu had changed the position of the heart so that the enemy would mistake the doppelganger's left chest as the fatal part. In the end, the doppelganger's heart was on the right. In this way, it would undoubtedly increase the doppelganger's chances of survival and ability to fight back. When the doppelganger grew its own heart in the future, it would also be on the right. Next, the most important thing is to use the soul source crystal to give the doppelganger a soul. Su Qingyu said in a serious tone, you're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.